a second. There's Mark's here. Now we still got 5 minutes, so keep playing. Destiny will be here in a minute.
Why can I only hear music?
You can hear me. You should be able to hear me now, right? Can you not hear me? Okay, well, that would be... Okay, hold on. That should be... Hold on. I see my thing moving, so that's on your end. You need to change your... Hold on. Let's see.
I can hear you now properly.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I was going to say, I think I'm okay.
Music over the top.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you could. I think that's on your end because I was fucked up for about 20 minutes beforehand.
You're not the man I would rate as the most.
Well, I know. Yeah, I know. Usually,
I've ever come across.
Usually, it's my fault when it comes to tech, but nah, I just messed up for 20 straight minutes. That's why I was like, nah, I think I have it.
Well, I think it was messing up for several straight days last time we tried to do this, wasn't it? You were caught in some snowstorm, cucked by the weather itself.
Cucked by God himself, perhaps. I don't know. Somebody doesn't want me to have this debate, it seems. We had to reschedule, of course, the original. And then I wanted to have it for a long time before that, too. And we, this has been like almost a 2 year, maybe a full 2 year thing, honestly, at this point. Like it's been a while. So
it's been tiresome.
It's been tiresome. Oh, so tiresome. All right, now, it was tiresome that snow the other day. I'll tell you that. All right, now.
Yes. Well,
not my thing. All right, so I imagine. Go ahead.
I could make a very good joke here, but I'm not going to because you're the moderator.
Yeah, you're supposed to be nice to the ref. What the fuck?
I know. That's why I didn't make the joke.
All right, so he has the link. So we still got about 3 minutes. I don't know. Well, I'll just play this music.
I've opened this can of Red Bull for nothing, Ralph. I am flying to wherever you live, and you are going in the harshest headlock ever known to man. I will literally crush the wind out of you.
I would be shocked if he didn't show up. Oh, you know what I can do, though? Let me switch over to the debate panel. Oh, that looks crazy. Hold on. Let me fix that.
Did you have a good Christmas?
I did. I had a good Christmas.
Baby on the way, marital bliss and all that?
That's right. Yeah, actually I did. It was great, actually. Went up to upstate New York.
You seem to have disappeared.
Yeah, I'm trying to, just for a second, I'm just trying to fix this where we can get it pinned and everything will look just dandy here. Okay. Now, on that one, we'll have to change it on this is a little bit meta, but basically I have to
Maybe I'll just debate myself for the next 2 hours.
Oh, no. I have to... Go ahead.
Bog 1v1 sent $3. Mark, he'll crack a Red Bull for you, mate.
All right. Now, see, why is it on the... Okay. There we go. Now it has...
Is anyone still here? Am I the only person here? What is happening?
No, you can still hear me, right? Can he not hear me now? Oh, wait, hold on. Oh, I accidentally muted myself, too. I was just I had to turn off the camera so I could even everything out here. Basically, I'm trying to get everything on the right side.
If this all goes wrong again, shall I just debate myself?
Yes, I think so. I think that would be good, actually. All right, now, let's see. So you're pinned. I'm just trying to make sure I got you on the right side. That's the... Okay.
You'd think somebody who's been doing this as long as you have, Ralph, it would be like a smooth, professional experience.
It's kind of complicated because I have to pin each one until he gets here. I can't pin him, but anyway.
Make sure if you're in the chat watching this that you're subscribed to my Odysee channel. That would be
what is your Odysee channel?
To do. What is my?
How are they going to know? What do you mean? Would they have to? They're going to. What do you mean? You're just throwing out your channel? They have to say the name of it.
My Odysee channel is just Mark Collett.
Well, I mean, I knew that, but I mean, you didn't say that.
Well, I would hope that since I'm the guest, my channel will be promoted somewhere during tonight's show because I'm not one of these people who's still allowed on YouTube. You see, because strangely enough, coincidentally
John
enough,
Bolton sent $3. Damn, Mark, you have aged like a bottle of wine, mate. Looking sharp.
Oh wow!
Thank you very much. I tell you what ages you the worst. Is children. I was looking great until I had a child 2.5 years later. It's gone downhill very rapidly.
I know. Let's see. Also, okay. All right, so we're just waiting on.
There's my channel in the chat, everybody. So
there you go. Yeah, if you just type in the chat, it'll pop up, and they can follow that right there.
And Gator's there. Gator's actually here. That's good. That's good.
Gator, by the way, why is the person don't spam buy Bitcoin? Please stop that. Whoever's doing that, don't ban them outright. But I just please stop. We see that. At least just type one line at a time if you're going to say that repeatedly.
Buy Bitcoin. Well, it might not be a bad time to buy.
Well, it's not. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't necessarily disagree with the advice, but just there you go. Okay, cool.
Buy the dip. That's the point.
Just put one line at a time is all I'm saying. I think that is
a man with your financial power, Ethan, has probably got hundreds of Bitcoins stashed away.
Yeah. I got donated half a Bitcoin, actually, by that guy who killed himself.
Wow, well done.
So, yeah.
I was going to say, you don't look like you're starving.
Nah, yeah, I'm doing pretty good, yeah. I got my new truck yesterday, or day before yesterday.
Yeah, I saw that.
It was a pretty nice one. All right, so we can just I don't know what. Okay, go ahead, Bolton.
John Bolton sent $3. Mark Tony Blair becoming Sir Tony Blair war criminal and Assange in the binge for telling the truth any takes.
Yeah, of course. I did an entire video on this last week. That's why you should be subscribed to my Odysee channel. Tony Blair being knight is an absolute disgrace, but make no mistake, this was completely down to the Queen. The Queen, it was all on her head. She decided this. He is now going to be a member of the Order of the Garter, which is actually the highest knighthood, the highest honour that the Queen can actually bestow. It's completely her decision to do this. This isn't influenced by ministers or anyone else. She chose this. It's an absolute disgrace, but it tells you one thing. The royal family are basically filthy multiculturalists and globalists who are really spitting in the faces of the British public. Tony Blair took us into Iraq on a lie. 183 British service personnel died in that war. The war cost us £8.4 billion. And on top of that, nearly 3,600 service personnel returned home wounded. And that was all based on a lie. And in the Chilcot inquiry, it came out that Blair lied. He knew he was lying. He ordered memos to be burnt to cover up his lies. And when all was said and done, he is now being honoured for this. The guy is a Zionist, globalist, warmonger. He should be rotting in a jail, not getting the highest honour that the monarchy can bestow on an individual. It's absolutely sickening. If you're still supporting the monarchy after this, you need to give your head a wobble.
I like that phrase. You don't hear that one over here in the States. All right, now, I did just talk to Destiny. He's going to join soon.
I hope so.
Well, I thought it was clear it was 4, but look, these things happen.
It was clear it was 4, and basically, if this was being scored in points, I would be getting a point now, but actually being on
John
time.
Bolton sent $3 made Jeffrey Pepstein and her lovely son that can't sweat haha. Jokes aside, you could say that the wars in the Middle East have been devastating for the Europeans TBF.
I mean, Destiny's probably just sat there making more of his mega bucks off his official YouTube channel that you can subscribe to and make donations to because, you know, spouting the official state narrative obviously pays far more than opposing it.
Now, and so we're going to do opening statements here.
Indeed. Who goes first?
Well, I don't know. I really just kind of usually just pick off the top of my head while we start the show. But I think, would you like to go first? I'm fine.
I don't mind.
I think that'd be good. That'd be fair. All right, let me let him in. Hello. Now let me also pin him to the screen here so we can see. And then I'll turn my camera on. Go ahead, Destiny. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Excellent. All right. Now I think. There it is. Wow. It looks smooth. It looks great. Both you gentlemen here on the screen. Welcome back to the Kill Stream Destiny. You know how we do it here. We're going to do intro statements, and I'm going to turn this off.
Penguin sent $3. Hope Destiny is on meth.
Okay.
You might talk some sense.
All right. Now, I'll turn that off. Now, we'll turn it on later at a certain point. But we're going to do opening statements. The topic is white genocide. Should I see how Wikipedia for people who don't know about this, maybe just what we've talked about white genocide before, of course, but this is how Wikipedia describes it, and take that for what it's worth, of course, too. The white genocide, white extinction, or white replacement conspiracy theory is a white supremacist. That's how they describe it, by the way. Is a white supremacist conspiracy theory which states that there is a deliberate plot, often blamed on Jews, is what it says here, to promote miscegenation, interracial marriage, mass non-white immigration, racial integration, low fertility rates, abortion, governmental land confiscation from whites, organized violence, and eliminationism in white-founded countries in order to cause the extinction of whites through forced assimilation, mass immigration, and violent genocide. Less frequently, black people, Hispanics, and Muslims are blamed for the secret plot, but merely as more fertile immigrants, invaders, or violent aggressors rather than the masterminds. Now I'm going to give it to Mark to take on, describe the issue how you think it is. Now that's how Wikipedia describes it. Now white genocide, take it however you want with your opening statement, and we're going to cover the whole issue and some of those topics and if that's the truth or whatever. Now go ahead. Mark.
Thank you very much. White genocide, or the demographic replacement of those of European descent, is a phenomenon that every Western nation faces. Originally, those who spoke about this topic were branded as conspiracy theorists. However, the reality of white people becoming a minority in their ancestral homelands is no longer regarded in that manner. Now, rather than being called a conspiracy theory, white replacement is openly celebrated by the establishment, the media, those in the corporate sector, those who control social media, and leading liberal commentators. White replacement is taking place. The only two issues up for debate is whether this replacement is part of a planned and concerted effort to reduce white people to minorities, and secondly, whether white people becoming a minority is a good thing or not. However, when I say these issues are up for debate, that is rather erroneous, as all forms of debate on this issue are shut down by the mainstream media, social media companies, big business, and even governments attempt to criminalize those who push back against such demographic change. This fact alone is enough to prove that white replacement is not just an accident, but that the powers that be endorse it. But let's look at the UK figures on demographic replacement, as they are very illuminating. In 1950, there were fewer than 20,000 non-whites in Britain, the vast majority of whom were first-generation immigrants. In other words, they weren't born here. These people made up just 0.04% of the population. By 2011, the time of the last census, the non-white population of Britain had risen to over 8 million and accounted for around 13% of the population. To put this into perspective, in just over 60 years, the non-white population of Britain has grown over 400-fold. This is a planned social experiment on an unprecedented level. And to put it into a historical perspective, more people arrive in Britain each year under the current government than arrived here between 1066, the last time we were successfully invaded, and 1939, the beginning of the Second World War. Mass immigration, which is the primary means by which this demographic change has been brought about, is not natural, it is a post-war phenomenon, and it was completely manufactured, managed, and accelerated by the establishment for political, social, and financial purposes. So that just leaves one point up for debate. Is this demographic change good? Well, white people all over the world, and especially in the UK, have consistently shown they don't want this change, whether that has been demonstrated in polls, in their habits such as white flights, or in voting patterns. Despite this, though, both sides of the illusory political divide have supported this demographic replacement, and the constant narrative from the mainstream media is that white people must accept immigration and embrace it, or else. The consequences of this replacement for white people in the UK have been, on balance, profoundly negative. Whilst white people are constantly told that minorities must be given special privileges and a leg up, when white people become a minority in towns and cities, they do not benefit from their minority status. They receive no protections and are often treated appallingly, as worse than second-class citizens. And the establishment and the media are regularly complicit in covering up crimes against white people that are perpetrated by those not indigenous to the British Isles. If white people are reduced to minorities, they will not be celebrated and protected, but instead they will be a hated and despised minority that will be repeatedly blamed for all the ills and all the failings of the multicultural state in which they live. I advocate for the UK and for other Western nations to remain places where people of European descent are a supermajority and where their cultures and traditions remain dominant. And I believe this is not just best for Europeans, but it is best for all peoples from all over the world.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Getting us started here. Destiny, again, welcome back to the show, and you can go ahead and do your opening now.
Yeah, when people talk about white genocide, I think the biggest hang-up that they have is establishing the intentionality part. I think that there are a lot of reasons why immigration benefits the society, especially economic ones. And I think that there are a lot of people that support immigration throughout all of society, all without having white genocidal reasons. So the establishment of an intentionality, I think, is a pretty important part of genocide. If we agree with the I forget which conference it was that established like genocide as a thing, but the intentionality part is pretty important. One of the reasons why, or the main reason why talking about kind of white genocide, I think, is a pretty boring topic or a topic that isn't very relevant to modern day debate is, or even political conversations, is that there's not really anything you can do about it at this point. The idea of trying to block all immigration based on a certain skin color, or the idea of even getting the majority of the public to support such a policy is basically impossible. And I think that the framing around a lot of these topics of there are secret people trying to get white people to be a minority, et cetera, I just don't think it's very productive to getting to an actual good place in terms of public policy or discourse. I do agree that there are problems, even problems faced by white people uniquely, maybe in certain countries in the West. But I don't think that the solution to these problems is some fantastical border policy that has zero chance of passing in almost any relevant country. I think that instead it's probably better that we talk about those specific problems and then the policy positions we would need to adopt to address those problems. And then, yeah, that's all I got.
Now, what do you say to that, Mark? He kind of just says not even. He didn't say it was not a big deal necessarily, but the ship has kind of sailed on it.
He didn't really say anything, did he?
Well,
I mean, he didn't really say anything other than, well, it's sort of going to happen and you can't really stop it, and that's it. So,
well, white people coming a minority is going to happen. The white genocide. I don't think
so. So let's establish this. You do believe that white people will become a minority. That is actually happening. So
when you define white people with the one-drop rule, then, like, mathematically, of course, that's always going to happen. If any amount of Hispanic or black blood makes you Hispanic or black, then you're necessarily going to have a minority.
You don't need to say 1,000 words very quickly.
Your opening speech was like 5 minutes long. I don't know why you would.
You don't need to say 1,000 words very quickly. I'm just trying to establish you are accepting that white people in Western nations are becoming minorities, and the likelihood is that if trends continue, white people in nations like Britain, France, Germany, United States, wherever, will be a minority and will no longer hold majority status. You agree with that?
Based on how you define white people, yeah, of course.
Based on how I define white people, we're not going into Sargon-esque definitions here, are we, Destiny?
Well, if a black person and a white person have a child, what kind of child is that child?
It's mixed race.
What would you consider mixed race would be non-white to you, right?
Mixed race would be mixed race.
Well, hold on. No. Hold on. You can't push me on an answer and not answer a very simple question. I'm answering the question.
Uh-huh. It's quite simple. Whenever a child is born that is mixed race, I classify them as mixed race. I classify them as somebody who's of mixed race origin. It's generally the media and the establishment that defines anyone who is mixed race as black. So, for example, Obama is not black. Obama is mixed race, yet he is widely categorized as the first African-American president, when in fact he's mixed race. I'm saying they're mixed race. And when we say that white people are going to become a minority, that obviously means that people of European descent, who are wholly of European descent, will become a minority. That's quite simple.
Sure, but by that definition, then, isn't literally everybody being genocided? Black people and Hispanic people and every other minority group? Because the more interracial marriages that happen...
What a ridiculous point.
Hold on. So I need you... Hold on. I didn't even finish my question. I know that you might be used to steamrolling people because you don't talk
I'm not used to steamrolling people.
Sure. Well, let me finish my... I
just noticed how slippery you're getting. You're getting away from what we're talking about.
I'm not being slippery. I just want to... The problem is, by the certain premises that you lay out for the argument, you're almost begging the question, right? So with any person that has a child with a white person, if that child is considered non-white, and if we have multiple ethnic groups mixing together, and we're trying to use this framing to say, well, there's a white genocide happening. Well, if a mixed race child is not a white child, and you're telling me now that a mixed race black child is not a black child, they're mixed race, then it kind of sounds like everybody's being genocided. Now, I don't think you want to own that conclusion because obviously it weakens the white genocide point. But would you not agree then that if a lot of Hispanic and black people and white people are all interracially marrying and having kids, that kind of every race is being genocided?
No, because it's different, because what we're talking about here, we're talking about nations where white people are either indigenous or white people were the founders of those nations. And the white people in those nations are being reduced to minority. So here in Britain, white people are indigenous. So the English, the Irish, the Scots and the Welsh are the indigenous people, and they are being reduced to minority status. You don't have, say, Nigerians being reduced to a minority status in Nigeria. So it's a completely different point. You know it is. You're just being intentionally slippery. And what I'm trying to establish is that you do agree that white people in Western nations are becoming a minority.
Okay. So
it's a yes or no, really, isn't it?
Okay, well, so I understand that you have a dialogue tree that you usually like to run people down. Don't call me slippery just because I'm trying to engage with your questions on more than just...
I'm not calling you slippery because you're trying to engage with my questions. I'm calling you slippery because you're not trying to engage with my questions.
So initially, you said that there was a planned genocide of white people, okay? You said there was a planned genocide of white people, and then you said mixed race children don't count as white. That's fair, okay? We might end up agreeing finally on everything you're saying. I'm just trying to make sure we have all of our terms and everything straight, okay? Now you're telling me that it's not so much that white people are being genocided. It's that the indigenous or founders of a certain nation, which may be white people, are being genocided. There might be minority genocides going on as well because of interracial dating and children making and everything. But you don't care as much about those genocides as you do about the white genocide. Is that...
No, what I'm saying is that I don't believe it is a good thing for white people to reduce to minority status for a variety of different reasons, which we can get into. Okay. But what I am clearly stating or trying to ask you is, you accept that white people, people of European descent, are becoming minorities in Western countries?
That seems to be the case, yes. If we are ignoring mixed race children, then yes, white people seem to probably be becoming minorities.
Okay, so we agree on that. We agree on that. So what we probably don't agree on then is whether that is intentional. But what I would say to you is, are you streaming this on YouTube?
Yeah.
Yeah. How many subscribers have you got?
Why is that relevant to this conversation?
I'm just asking. Just asking.
40,000.
40,000 subscribers. What, watching now, or I thought you had more than 40,000 subscribers.
If you know how many I have, then why are you asking me?
Because it's interesting to see. You see, the point that I'm getting to is a lot of this can be seen as intentional simply by the effort that the establishment, including, as I said, the corporate sector, social media, the mainstream media and the government, the effort they go to actually prevent not people talking about white people becoming a minority, because that is something that's accepted now. Stop people complaining about it. So, for example, you're on YouTube with your many hundreds of thousands of subscribers with a monetized account, and you are admitting that replacement migration is taking place. But because you favor that, you are allowed to keep your account. Whereas people like myself, who spoke within the law, within the legal limits about similar things, and obviously speaking within the legal limits in Britain means that any YouTube account would easily be within legal limits in America, get completely taken down. And that does prove that there is a major drive by the establishment, which big social media companies are part of, to silence people like myself who disagree with white people becoming a minority, whereas voices like yourself, who actually celebrate this, are amplified.
Okay, so a few things. So one, when you say admitting that replacement migration is taking place, I don't know if you mean replacement migration in an intentionality point or not intentional. That's a pretty important part of that. In terms of admitting replacement migration is taking place, I think everybody it will quote unquote admit this. It's not something to be admitted. You can just look at statistics. Anybody on the left or right, any economist, any sociologist, anybody will say, well, yeah, of course, necessarily as more people from other races migrate and people intermarry, there's going to be a less proportional amount of white people in any given majority white country where immigration is coming from non-majority white places. Number one. Number two, you say within the law, within the legal limits. It's not really relevant to YouTube or any other types of online conversations because they don't function as an arm of the law. They have their own individual terms of services, which they can or cannot ban people for. Now, we can have a discussion on what those TOSs should be, but any appeal to legality is not really relevant when we're talking about what's allowed or not allowed on certain platforms. And then finally, the conclusion that you draw is a massive non sequitur. Just because a conversation is blocked in a certain platform doesn't mean that people are implicitly admitting that conversation is true. There might be a whole bunch of people getting banned. Well, let me finish my response.
Go on then. Keep squeaking.
I'm not squeaking. Okay.
You are squeaking.
Are you okay?
You are squeaking.
Can I finish my response to you? When you jump in on personal attacks and you call me slippery and stuff, I'm giving you advice. The appearance to both me and the audience is that you feel like you're weak on your points. You have to attack me personally because you're not used to engaging with somebody that can actually address those points. Okay?
You're well known for squeaking and slipping out of things.
Okay, I'm just putting that out on the floor. You can engage with it if you want to or not. Okay, so the third thing you said is a non sequitur, right? Intentional efforts to suppress a certain conversation does not necessarily mean that that particular topic is true or people don't want to admit it's true. For instance, if YouTube decided to ban all talk of like, I don't know what you believe now, but like of Hillary Clinton being a reptile, just because they're banning that talk doesn't mean, wow, obviously she is a reptile because it's getting banned. You need another connector there. That doesn't logically follow. Okay.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
That is exactly what you just said.
Yeah, what I'm saying is, on YouTube, and it's not just YouTube, you just said a single platform, it's every platform. So you have YouTube, you have Facebook, you have Twitter, you have all social media sites, except for sort of renegade social media sites like, say, BitChute or Odysee or Telegram, which, are pressured to follow suit and to some degree have to with certain commentators. All of them hold a line whereby people are encouraged to celebrate this demographic change. And I'll give you an example. There are videos on YouTube of content creators saying, oh, I went to London and white people are a massive minority in London and this is great and we should celebrate it. This is fantastic. Yet, if you go to London and say, well, white people, they're a minority here now. I think London's lost a little bit of its character. It's not as British anymore. It's not as English. Then you would be banned. And that is done on a blanket level across mainstream social networks. That is done on a blanket level in the media. And what we are seeing here is anybody who advocates for white people to remain a supermajority in their ancestral homelands is being shut down, which does point to there being intentionality, because there is a widespread campaign to stop white people organizing along ethnic lines and to stop white people advocating for their own interests, whereas every other racial group is allowed to advocate for their interests and is actually encouraged to organize along ethnic or racial lines.
Okay, so you restated what I just said was what didn't logically follow, but I'll restate it and then you tell me if you agree or not. I guess we can move from here. So you're saying that because people are banned from a multitude of platforms for trying to talk about X, since they're banned from talking about that, X must be true. This is basically what you're saying, right?
No. Do you want me to state what I've said again, but quicker? So we're not like eating up the entire debate.
Go ahead, do that.
State
it again, but quicker. Yeah.
Right. You can talk on social media about whites becoming a minority, but only if you support whites becoming a minority. So social media doesn't ban you from talking about whites becoming a minority. They only ban you if you disagree with that happening or wish to in any way advocate against that. So this isn't like some mad thing what you're trying to paint it as. You're trying to say, well, if YouTube bans you from saying Hillary Clinton's a lizard, that doesn't mean Hillary Clinton's a lizard. No. That's what you're doing there is you're drawing a false equivalence to try and derail this into some kind of comedy because you can't answer what I'm saying.
I'm trying to understand your question. I'm not trying to derail anything.
Now, what do you say? Hold on. For example, like there might be an editorial where they talk about the browning of America or whatever, or they talk about, whites are going to be a minority. And I've seen these myself and they're celebrating it, right? It's in the New York Times.
I'm not disagreeing with that.
Well, yeah, I'm just asking, what do you say about that though? Like, I mean, yeah, I'm not even saying you're taking issue with it.
I think there's a lot of dumb shit that gets banned because of what advertisers think is friendly or whatever, or what most people will support without canceling somebody. But I agree that a lot of that is cringe. However, just because platforms, even if it's every platform in the world, is not platforming a certain type of speech, that doesn't necessarily mean that there is some truth that those people are getting at. There could be a variety of reasons for why they're banning that speech, not just because they're trying to hide the truth. That's all I'm trying to say.
No, wait. You have just earlier on in this very debate accepted that white people are becoming a minority. You support that. You are a multiculturalist. Hence, you are allowed to keep your 400,000 strong YouTube army, make lots of money, have monetized videos. But if somebody came on YouTube today, if I started another YouTube channel, I had 100,000 subs, mine initially got shadow banned, then demonetized, then banned altogether. All channels that say exactly the same, come from the same starting point as you do, that this is happening, but then say we disagree with it happening, are banned. So what you're seeing here is a concerted effort across all platforms to stop anyone talking about demographic change.
I've acknowledged all of this, but what I'm saying is, because you're trying to say that because that's happening, either people don't want people to know that it's true, or they're banning it because there's some intentionality there that they're trying to hide. What I'm trying to say is there's an alternative explanation, and it might just be that this particular type of speech is so unpopular that there's pressure on advertisers not to host this type of speech.
But it's not so unpopular. It's not so unpopular because when I had a channel, I had videos with millions of views. When I had a channel, I was gaining 1,000 subscribers a week until YouTube shadow banned it. There are plenty of people out there talking about this that are very popular. It's not that it's not popular. Trump got kicked off Twitter. He was very, very popular. He was the president. Yeah, it's not a matter of popularity. This isn't just down to some sort of series of unfortunate coincidences. There is intentionality here, and you only have to be a mildly intelligent person who can join up dots to see that.
What I'm trying to tell you is it's possible that you can get views, you can get like millions of views on videos. What I'm saying is this particular type of speech is so unpopular, not that nobody will see it, but there's enough of a public backlash against it that advertisers might want to say, hey, we don't want to be involved in advertising here, or we don't want to be involved in this particular thing. And that sort of public pressure is usually what gets this type of content delisted.
So you're saying now you can have millions of views, you can have a 96, 97% positive ratio. People love your videos, but you'll get banned because the 3% who are disliking your video are so powerful that the advertisers will listen to them, YouTube will listen to them, and your speech goes down the toilet.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. We'll see if you can engage in good faith. Do you think only 3% of people in society are offended by views related to white nationalism or ethnic majority white people needing to be a necessity for the future of countries' destinies? Like, do you think only 3% of people in society are offended by that? Because you made it sound like just because you're getting 97% thumbs up or whatever doesn't
on the videos with millions of views
doesn't necessarily mean that the overwhelming amount of people support that type of speech or even want to see it on these types of platforms.
But you see, what you're saying here is that there is a group of people who are undefined, who are apparently seeing these videos that didn't like it but didn't say anything about it, and because of that group of people the videos have to be removed. Well, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's the same with Trump. Huge amount of support, roughly half of Americans supporting him, maybe more depending on what you believe, removed from all social networks. Now that tells you that this isn't being done, this mass deplatforming isn't being driven by large majorities. It is being driven by small vocal minorities or a tiny minority of people who are in control of platforms that have a very politicized agenda. And part of that agenda is ensuring that white people don't advocate for themselves. I don't know who that tiny minority of people could be, but I'm sure somebody in the chat can help us out with that.
So you legitimately believe then that that type of speech, that over 50% of people that are on YouTube are in favor of seeing stuff related to like white nationalism or white supremacy, that these are ideas that they would find palatable to be on YouTube.
I didn't say white supremacy. I said white people advocating for their own interests. You then injected white supremacy to make my
very
more
hard to find one without the other, right? I can have a conversation.
I'm not a white suit. Where
I don't know if you are or not, but half of what you said in this conversation is like kind of not true. So for instance, when you say white people can't have or advocate on their own ethnic lines or whatever, I've had conversations about it before and I haven't gotten banned anywhere.
When I say white,
but hold on. But like, the problem is that oftentimes this is paired with other types of speech, and that's why these people end up getting deplatformed. Is they're not just saying like, hey, like, you know, black people have their own groups, Asian people have their own groups, like Asian people, a whole bunch of different people. Why can they have their own group and white people can have their own group? I've had conversations like this before, and I don't get deplatformed on any of these platforms. So my guess is that when you say, well, you can't have these conversations, it's because there's usually other things that go along with it, like the little joke you just made about, well, there's a certain minority of people that are controlling these things. I wonder who they are. That's generally the case.
No. Number one, you don't get deplatformed because you are an establishment mouthpiece. You support what the establishment are saying, and you're leading a group of people who all support you down a road of sort of mocking white advocacy. That's the first thing. Secondly, making jokes shouldn't really be illegal, should it? And
no
thirdly,
one is talking about
people who advocate for white people as a group don't just face losing their social media accounts. They face losing their jobs. They face all manner of social problems which are leveled at them by a small and very aggressive minority of people who seek to silence them. But the same minority group that seek to silence whites who advocate for themselves raise up and amplify the voices of other ethnic groups that seek to advocate for their rights and their interests, which exposes another massive hypocrisy. So if somebody came on this stream and said that a black man came on this stream and said that they were advocating for black rights, they were advocating for black people in America or Britain, as a racial or ethnic group, nobody would bat an eyelid. But society has been conditioned by a small group of people who have taken control of the media, social media, etc., to basically turn a blind eye or walk away from anyone who says they advocate for white interests, because if you say you advocate for white interests, there are social consequences. We are shut down for advocating for our own group, which in the current, larger political sphere is massively hypocritical because everyone else is advocating for their racial group.
So when we talk about cancel culture, I don't think that this is driven by just a small minority of people. When you talk about how people can lose their jobs or they can get deplatformed from large platforms, like I'm pretty sure that the pressure here is pretty massive. It's not just 3% of the society that agrees with these certain ideas. There's a lot of people that participate in this type of stuff. And I think when you look at like the adpocalypse in 2017 in YouTube over like family friendly content and stuff, or all of the weird stuff going on with children, like a lot of this stuff isn't just like a small minority of people that are shadow controlling the cabal trying to control everything from behind the scenes. I think there are genuinely a lot of big social movements that push in certain directions. Now, maybe you'll say they exist, but they're controlled by a minority of people, I guess. But I don't think that it's just like a few people that are driving this. I think that there's a huge cultural consensus around some of these ideas, and then that pushes advertisers to act in certain ways, and then that pushes platforms to act in certain ways. I think that's a far more believable explanation than there is like the shadow cabal, unless we can find them, or I guess unless you could show me them. But maybe that'll be the next part of the conversation we're moving on to.
Well, I was going to say we did, I made a notation here, the intentional part, right? That is a big part that we haven't really delved into at this point yet. So why don't we do it now? Mark,
I'll talk another point about this intentionality.
Yeah, that's kind of.
I'll talk another point about this intentionality. Sure. I'll give you a great example. Everyone knows that I work in design. If I started Marky C's Magical Design Company tomorrow and put up a job application saying only white people are welcome for this job, or saying that, say, black people are not welcome at my company, I don't want to employ them, I wouldn't do such a thing. But if I did, there would be absolute uproar and outrage. But in Western nations such as Britain, you do have examples where white people are excluded from certain jobs, certain positions in the state, certain positions in the media. White people are openly discriminated against in a number of ways, and they're the only people who can be discriminated against. Now, at this point, you've either going to say...
clarifying question. So in the United Kingdom, you're telling me it's legal to discriminate on the basis of race against white people? Can you do that for a job?
Illegal. It's illegal to discriminate on the basis of race, but that is something that doesn't seem to apply when it comes to white people. So I'll give you an example. The fire service in England, they changed their testing. So you needed 90% on the admission test to get in if you're a white male, 80% if you're a white female, and 70% if you were somebody from an ethnic minority background. Now, that's clear discrimination. Yet those things are basically rubber-stamped and endorsed by the same people who say that they want no more discrimination and they want equality. That isn't equality. And what's happening here is a system of discrimination, just like I was talking about on social media, a system of discrimination that discriminates against white people, turns white people into second-class citizens. And again, this is endorsed by social media, because you can't talk about it on social media. This is endorsed largely by the mainstream media in the state. Now, do you agree with that kind of discrimination?
I would have to see in terms of like affirmative action, basically, is what you're talking about. I don't know. I would have to see how it plays out in the UK. I can speak to US laws a lot better, but my understanding is in the UK, I don't think you're allowed to engage in this type of discrimination. But
it does happen. I mean, even the BBC have posted job adverts specifically for people who are not from indigenous backgrounds.
Saying it does happen doesn't mean that it's legal or allowed. There are a lot of things that do happen everywhere, right? So I'm not interested in like it happened one time, but more so like as a rule, like this is something that's become legal or this is something that's been culturally accepted. These are like far different than this has.
But it is culturally accepted. That's what I'm saying. Discriminating against white people is culturally accepted.
In terms of, hold on, stop broadening the conversation. In terms of like job applications or like tenants that can live in areas, my understanding is in the way of the United States, and I'm pretty sure it's similar in the UK, there are certain classes that you're not allowed to discriminate on no matter what. You can't say renting a house to only black people, only Asian people, only white people. My understanding is I think that's similar in the UK. Now, affirmative action falls under a special different thing we use for some universities. I don't know if you guys have that for certain types of jobs as well. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. So I can't speak to British law as well as I can to US law. But regardless, even if these things do exist, we haven't gotten anywhere near the intentionality aspect of like a white genocide or a white discrimination. There are other plausible explanations for why we enact these types of policies that aren't just white genocide.
Let me explain in simple terms. Laws are enacted to bring about fairness, to end discrimination, supposedly. And these laws prevent you from advertising a job on the basis of ethnicity. But then, once that law has been enacted, usually another law is enacted alongside it, which states, despite what they've said earlier, that you can't actually discriminate in the workplace on the basis of race, every workplace has to take so many quotas of people. So, in fact, they are discriminating on the basis of race, but only in the benefit of people who aren't white. You understand that that's a very simple point.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I never take anything from people like you on face value.
No, you understand that
hold on, let me just say, okay, because you keep throwing so much together. When you talk about like the BBC is hiring certain people, right? If you're saying that like the BBC is looking for like a reporter to report in a certain area that has to match like the ethnicity of the area, I can agree with that. I think that that's an okay thing. Even in the United States, we have exceptions for stuff like that. For instance, when if you wanted to make a documentary about Martin Luther King, you're allowed to discriminate there when it comes to hiring an actor. It doesn't have to be equal opportunity. You're not going to have an Asian woman playing Martin Luther King in a movie, right? Much the same that there are certain limited exceptions where asking for people of a certain background.
Why not? You've got black people playing English kings and queens now. Why can't a white person play Martin Luther King?
Hilarious. So there are certain times where it makes sense for some forms of like discrimination to be okay. So when you're saying BBC job postings, it's making me wonder if they were looking for reporters in certain areas, in which case I can understand it. If you want to have a broader conversation about affirmative action, I mean, I'm not necessarily in favor of affirmative action. There are some cases where I can see it being the case, but when you bring up BBC job offerings, this is what is coming to mind for me. And it sounds to me like you agree that there are larger laws in the UK that make it illegal to hire somebody or not hire somebody, at least on the basis of race or sex, or there's probably other protected classes in the UK as well. So if it has happened before, I would probably disagree with it. If some people are pushing for it, I would probably disagree with that. But this still doesn't get us anywhere near the intentionality aspect of white genocide.
I really like the way you say an awful lot of words very quickly, yet say nothing of substance. That's a real skill.
If I ever say something and you don't understand what I'm saying, I can break down whatever. Okay. Every word I say is very intentional. And if you don't understand it, you're not following something, just tell me and I will re-explain it for you. Okay? I'm not just talking into the ether.
You stated that a white person shouldn't play a role like Martin Luther King, yet black people are now playing the roles of English kings and queens. The fact is, that's another interesting point that you raised yourself that defeats your own argument, that when a black person plays a white historical character, everyone cheers and applauds in the press, the media, on social media. If you speak out against it, you get into trouble. Whereas if Mel Gibson was, cast to play Martin Luther King, there'd be outrage. You could not have a white person play a black person, and
I never said that a white person couldn't play MLK if they wanted to. I'm just saying that you have the option to discriminate there for artistic purposes or for other purposes in the United States.
Mel Gibson as Martin Luther King.
Sure, if you want to. Also, are you saying there are black people playing like historically accurate English kings? Are you talking about like Lord of the Rings or like fictional things?
No, I'm talking. There was a black actress recently cast to play Anne Boleyn.
Okay, I mean,
I didn't see that.
But I mean, like, if I'm saying that if white people want to play historical,
white people being erased from their own history. Okay. I did a video on that.
All I'm saying is that if you want to discriminate on the basis of race for some things, like for instance hiring actors or whatever, then you have the opportunity to do that as somebody that's hiring out that type of talent.
Right. My point was that the first thing the establishment does is say there is no discrimination on the basis of race. Everything has to be done on the basis of people's skills and people's ability. And that on the surface sounds very good and very fair. You have an ability-based system. So the best person, the best qualified, gets the job. That is equality of opportunity. But equality of opportunity doesn't last long because the next law passed is always one that ensures equality of outcome. So at first they say, right, there can't be any vetting on race at all. And then once that law has passed, they then pass another law saying, but you have to have a certain ethnic quota inside your company. So even if the white guy is the best guy for the job, he can't get the job. You've got to give it to an ethnic minority. So all of these laws, when put together, show intentionality. They show a system that is actively being designed, actively being tinkered with, actively being geared towards dispossessing white people and turning them into second-class citizens.
Do you not think there might be other reasons why people would advocate for affirmative action type pushes for more minority representation, or can the only explanation be white genocide?
There's one question here, my friend. You either want equality of opportunity or you don't. Now, if this was about equality, it would be about equality of opportunity and the best would rise to the top. Now, I'll tell you this. I have no problem whatsoever when I see black people dominate certain sports, like track sports, like sprinting or long distance running. Doesn't bother me at all.
Hold on, wait. What was my question? Do you remember?
I don't lose sleep over that. But
wait. Do you remember what my question was?
Yeah, I do. You said, could there be other reasons why this is done?
Yes.
And I'm explaining why this is part of. I'm answering your question with an example, so hopefully you will understand what I'm saying. I'm not bothered, and I don't think any white person in the world is bothered when black people dominate certain track sports. But then when white people dominate something like swimming or another sport like that, there is a massive nationwide campaign. There's newspaper articles, there's social media posts, there's blog posts, there's people going mad on Twitter saying, why isn't swimming more black, or swimming is too white? And it's always a one-way street. White people aren't complaining that there aren't enough white people running the 100 meters, but there are people complaining that there aren't enough black people swimming, or there aren't enough black people playing another sport where blacks are historically less represented on the basis of equality of opportunity. They're not as gifted in those particular sports. Why does that happen? Why is there always a drive to get more ethnic minorities into things that white people excel at, but there's no drive to get white people into events or fields which black people excel at.
Okay, so the problem is that oftentimes when people talk about equality of opportunity, they have a very naive look on what opportunity means. A lot of people will say something like equality of opportunity just means you have the opportunity to apply for a job, or you have the opportunity to play a sport. And they'll literally like just give you a ball and say, well, here you go. Everybody's on the same playing field right now. But that's not typically how opportunity works in society. Opportunity can be determined not only at birth, but sometimes before birth. It might be where your parents are born. It might be the types of friends and family that you have around you, like as an adolescent growing up. It might be the types of schools you go to. There's like a whole bunch of, it might be the societal influences from television shows and movies. So when we talk about what equality of opportunity means, I think generally when people push for affirmative action type things, and I'm not saying I necessarily agree with this, but I understand the argument. It's not trying to just say we want more women and more black people, even though they suck. The idea is that there are certain groups that have disproportionate adversities that they face earlier in life that other groups won't face. Typically, usually white people won't face these adverse opportunities. So the goal is to give them kind of a leg up to either keep up, catch up, or to serve as examples for other minority people so that they can step into those roles later on, hopefully without help. The idea behind any affirmative action program, ideally, if you're not being crazy, is that you have a little bit in the beginning and then that kind of spurs on or encourages some like genuine interest or motivation from that group of people. And then eventually they can get into those positions, less any affirmative action. A really good example of this is the United States, where we drove really hard to get women to go to college, and now they're going to school so much they're like dwarfing men in college. It's like 60-40 in terms of the graduation rates for women now in college versus men. So I don't think that equality of opportunity just means that every single person is given the exact same job application. I think that's a really naive way to look at it. I think equality of opportunity goes a bit deeper. People try to tinker with this in all sorts of different ways, whether it's affirmative action in school, whether it's hiring preferences in jobs. Some of these I would agree with. Some of these I wouldn't agree with. If you want to talk about any one of those specific policies, that's fine. But to just say affirmative action, therefore white genocide, I think kind of misreads the intention of every single person at every level of society that's trying to implement some of these changes. I don't think a sociology or an anthropology professor in college, I don't think a sociology or an anthropology professor in college is thinking, we're going to get rid of these white people. Or I don't think a politician is thinking like, we're going to get rid of these white people. Or I don't think somebody hiring somebody is like, we're going to get rid of these white people. I think that there can be broader cultural movements in a certain direction where people are trying to encourage everybody in society to have more of an equality of opportunity, that it's not just meaning like everybody can sign up for a certain job.
No, I didn't say that though, did I? I said what they have done is they have married anti-discrimination laws with laws that then actively discriminate against whites, which shows intentionality.
So I can just explain what I said again, but because you have an anti-discrimination law doesn't necessarily mean you're showing the intentionality of a white genocide. You could be coming at this from the point of view, okay, certain groups of people in society are highly privileged or have had a lot of opportunities and other groups of people haven't. Therefore, we're going to enact some policy to give another group of people a leg up. Now, we can argue whether or not this is a good or bad way to approach society. Personally, I don't like a lot of affirmative action programs, but to say that because this affirmative action program exists, it displays an intentionality towards white genocide is a massive leap.
No. What we're doing here, Destiny, is we're painting a picture. And each one of the things that I am talking about, if taken alone within a vacuum on their own, might be an interesting discussion in itself. However, they're not all taken on their own within a vacuum. Everything that I've talked about so far tonight is part of a bigger picture. They're all intertwined and interwoven, and they are all pointing, when looked at together as a group, in the same direction. So when you take the fact that white people are not allowed to advocate for their own interests, when you take the fact that white people are deplatformed when they advocate for their own interests, when you take into account you can talk like you're doing on YouTube about this issue now, but only from your point of view, then you throw in the anti-discrimination stuff, then the affirmative action stuff, and you put it all together, and you put many other things together, it starts to build a bigger picture. And that bigger picture is that we are not only being replaced, which you've already agreed we are, but this replacement is being carefully managed and is not building some wonderful place of equality, some great wondrous world where everyone sings Kumbaya together and gets on. It's building a world where white people are intentionally being turned into second-class citizens, and where white people are not only discriminated against, but are actually treated, when they become minorities, as a hated minority. And often horrific crimes are committed against white people by ethnic minorities, and the state actively covers them up to ensure that other white people don't start advocating for their own rights and don't start pushing back against the multicultural system.
There is a way where you can take a collection of facts and points and you can try to draw whatever story that you want. But when you tell me that there is an intentional effort to get rid of the white race of people and replace them, and I do agree that we're being replaced, but everybody's being replaced by mixed race people. You seem to agree with that at the beginning, that black people, Hispanic people, Asian people, and white people were all being replaced. We're all being genocided by mixed race people. No. So as long as we agree that that's happening, and as long as we agree that all of these disparate little points in society are moving in that direction, but if I can show you, and you also seem to agree, that if every single actor in this area is not trying to cause a white genocide. I'm not trying to cause a white genocide. I don't think most politicians are trying to cause white genocide. I don't think the people that vote for these politicians are trying to cause white genocide. I don't think most employers are trying to cause white genocide. If we agree that none of these people are acting in an intentional manner, sure, you can try to paint together a big picture where at the end of the day you say, well, hey, look, we're moving towards this direction, therefore intentionality. But like conventional wisdom would tell us that this is something that we absolutely shouldn't do. There's literally the age-old saying of the road to hell is paved with good intentions. You know, you can get to different areas of society that you might consider not good with a whole bunch of well-meaning people that aren't intending to genocide white people. And I don't think that just a collection of facts showing a bunch of, you know, well-meaning, potentially liberals trying to say, hey, we need affirmative action. Hey, you know, these people are fucked. Hey, we need to help these people. And then saying, oh, they're trying to white genocide. I need something stronger than that. I need something better. When you agree that every, of course you need something better. If you agree with me, you get kicked off YouTube. Every single step of the way. Okay, can you tell me in this whole chain of causality, where does the intentionality come from, and how do they bleed it down to everybody else and nobody even realizes it?
Well, I'll give you a great example of intentionality. In the UK, there have been huge. Horrible things that have happened to white people. So you have in the UK a phenomenon known as grooming gangs. Now, grooming gangs are overwhelmingly Pakistani Muslims, and these Pakistani Muslims prey upon overwhelmingly white schoolgirls, many of whom are underage. Now, at conservative estimates, hundreds of thousands of these white schoolgirls have been preyed upon by these Pakistani Muslim grooming gangs. By the largest estimate, which is from a British Labour MP, Sarah Champion, you can look this up, she claims around 1 million girls have been targeted or have been victims of these gangs in some ways. Now, there has been a massive police, social services, and local government cover-up of these crimes to intentionally protect that racial minority and to prevent white people looking at what's going on and saying, this is bad, multiculturalism isn't working out well for us, we need to stand up for our own rights. So the government covers this up. So if there wasn't intentionality, and if the government was acting in the interests of the majority, which are still white Britons here in Britain, they would look at something like the grooming gang problem and say, look, white people are being targeted, this is unfair, this is racially or ethnically driven. We need to do something about it. But instead of that, they cover it up. Why cover it up?
Can you think of any other reason? I'm assuming that all of this is true, and unfortunately, I don't have the background to know whether or not your particular claims are true or not. But let's say that they were true. Is your claim then that the police officers, you're saying, so who was involved in this cover-up? Let me ask you for one or two parties that were involved in this cover-up.
The police were, you can Google, I'll give you some specific examples.
So you're saying the police were, so do you think
South
that
Manchester police officers were specifically told to, and I can quote this, investigate other ethnic groups. Do not investigate Pakistani Muslims for grooming offences. And there have been cases where white fathers have gone to places where their daughters were being raped and they were arrested rather than the rapists. There are cases where white girls have been repeatedly raped by dozens or hundreds of men, and when they have gone to the police and made a complaint, the police have arrested them for prostitution to silence them. All of these things have come out. This has been going on for years. There has been a massive establishment cover-up. And when the establishment ordered a full inquiry into this, they then said the inquiry wasn't fit for public consumption and sealed it. And you're going to say, well, we don't know what was in the inquiry. I can take a calculated guess.
Well, are you saying that so nobody was arrested by this, or the reports weren't made?
People have been arrested now, but it was covered up for decades, and there have been hundreds of thousands of victims, overwhelmingly white. Why would the state knowingly cover up crimes like this, which are perpetrated along ethnic lines, when white people are the victims? Because I can tell you this now, if white men were going out and specifically targeting ethnic minority children for any type of crime, let alone a sexual crime, they would be arrested, they would be locked up, and the key would be thrown away. But when ethnic minorities do that to white people, they are protected, it's covered up, and it is kept under wraps by social services, local government, and the police.
So when I'm looking at, I'm trying to look up reports here now that are coming out of the Home Office related to this. This is saying that about 85% of the people that made up these rape gangs were white men.
No.
Do you deny this?
No.
Okay, what source are you using to counter that? I'm curious, because if you're going to start bringing up like specifics, then I've got to start digging through, because I don't know. You could just be feeding me a whole bunch of bullshit.
I'm not feeding you BS. You can look at press reports, look at the names of the people, look at
no. Hold on. Press reports and names of the people do not establish a trend or any particular point of data.
Yes,
no, they don't. So so you said there were millions of rapes. So you've read through hundreds of thousands.
No,
of rapists,
I said a low ballpark estimate is hundreds of thousands. High ballpark is around 1 million.
Okay, and you're telling me you read through hundreds. How would you know the majority of the rapists were Pakistani or North African?
This is a problem. No. Pakistani Muslims. Specifically, this happens in communities that are Pakistani Muslim, and they specifically target white British girls. This has been a scandal in Britain that has recently sort of been exposed, and more light is being shone on it. And some of the cases are absolutely horrific.
Sure.
But
so when you talk about individual
multiculturalists in the government, the police, and social services knowingly covered this up to protect the multicultural society. Because multiculturalism, for people like you, people in the establishment, it's become almost like a god.
Okay, so this is not responding to anything. So in looking this up, it seems like there was one very early report that was based on shoddy data that tried to claim that most of the people here were Pakistani. But when this was researched more, it seems like the majority of the rapists in these rape gangs were white men.
No.
This idea, okay. Well, that seems to be because I Googled it now because I haven't followed the rape gangs. So do you think the 2020 Home Office report, was this just all lies or bullshit or what?
The Home Office report into this was actually sealed. It was never fully released.
Okay, so some of the claims that came out of this regarding the percentage of white men that were rapists, you think that number is just fabricated, or?
I am saying the vast majority of men involved in this were Pakistani Muslim descent. When you look at those...
but why do you say that? How do you know that?
When you look at those that have been charged, you look at their mugshots, you look at the data, you collate those who have actually been arrested for this, and you look at them, you can see who they are. Now, this is one of the things that
Wait, what percentage of rape? Hold on, don't try to assert bad faith. Wait, you've done this multiple times.
My eyes can tell.
Everybody's eyes sees different things. We all consume different media. You should know this better than anyone else listening right now, that all of us are in different media environments. All of us consume different types of media. By your own admission, if you're saying there's a huge multicultural project, then there's probably a ton of people that have never seen what you're talking about before. So don't say my eyes have seen something and then pretend that establishes a trend. When I'm trying to find some credible reporting on this or some credible thing, and I see that there is a Home Office report that was prepared that says 87% of the people involved with some of these rape gangs were white men, or that seems to be the consensus, and then you're telling me, well, that's not true because I've seen reports.
I can give you a report. Vulnerable children are being failed by the floppy left who failed to speak out against groups of Asian men. We say Asian men here when we mean people from the Indian subcontinent who have sexually exploited young white girls, according to a former front bench Labour MP. So that's a left-wing source.
Okay, wait, why would I care about what one
Champion
member of
was
Parliament
fired
says?
From Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet after she wrote an article in The Sun claiming Britain had a problem with British Pakistani men raping, exploiting white girls. Fired for talking about the sexual abuse of children because it goes against the multicultural narrative.
Why would I care about what one MP says over like an actual official prepared report? Why?
Why would you care about what one MP said? Because that one MP is the MP for Rotherham, and Rotherham is a place where over 1,400 girls were sexually abused by these Pakistani grooming gangs. And this was the epicenter of the news when it broke because it was such a big scandal. And you only have to take a look at the men.
You didn't answer my question at all.
Well, I just did.
Did this person have some research published? Did they do a study? Did they like go to the individual like police and like this is the data they gave me, or is this person just saying some shit and because you happen to agree?
The Labour MP just made it all up. You see, this is what you do again. And
hold on, wait. Are you telling me? No, I want to hear that. You're telling me it's inconceivable that a politician might make something up. I want to hear that. I'm so curious.
Observable reality is something you see with your own eyes. So when you read the stories about these men being prosecuted and you look at their names, you see their pictures, you see their reports, you see who make up these gangs. But because you have to not accept what I'm saying at all times, you have to find increasingly outlandish ways to write off what I say as being untrue, because you could never accept this point, because if you did, you would lose everything you have in your life.
Okay, so
just as I have lost things in my life to speaking the truth about this.
You're telling me that a cabal of people is controlling the global political system from the top down, trying to push a message of white genocide or multiculturalism for the purpose of eliminating white people. And in order to prove what you're saying is true, you're going to cite one of the very same politicians that's owned by that shadow cabal of people, like it supports your argument? You must understand how ridiculous this sounds.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't sound ridiculous, because if you listen to the words coming out of my mouth,
I've heard all of them.
The words that I read from the report, she was sacked when she finally did speak out about it.
Wait, but was she sacked because she was being a truth-sayer, or was she sacked because she was saying a bunch of shit with no research or report behind it?
She dared say something critical of the multicultural system, which dovetails back exactly to what we said at the very start of this.
Okay, so you
hold on. Wait. I have the story out of the I have the story out of the Daily Mail, and then I'll let you guys. I'll just read what the Daily Mail wrote because I have a story on here. Police officers who ignored the sexual abuse of underage girls by Pakistani grooming gangs should be named and shamed, campaigners demanded last night. The demand came after a leaked report failed to identify a key investigator in the Rotherham scandal, which saw at least 1,400 children preyed on between 1997 and 2013. The police watchdog has upheld a complaint that a chief inspector admitted to the father of a victim that abuse was ignored due to fears of increasing racial tensions. He is said to have claimed, with it being Asians, we can't afford for this to be coming out of town. We can't afford for this to be coming out or the town would erupt. But it emerged the officer cannot be identified by the Independent Office for Police Corruption. The full document is due to be published later this year. Rotherham MP Sarah Champion said yesterday she found it, quote, difficult to believe that the officer's identity could not be established. She said what we as a town need to see, and definitely for the survivors to get closure, they need to see the cases of misconduct. They need to see people held to account. And there's more in the story, but that's the gist of it, I would say, what he was talking about.
I just want to ask you this, Destiny. How many underage white girls have to be raped to ensure the multicultural society runs smoothly?
How do you determine which members of parliament you trust when they say things?
The point is,
you're not choosing politicians. I would rather look at reports and data and research than I saw all the reports on the Daily Mail.
You don't care because you don't want to criticize the multicultural society, which is why you're part of the problem. You would be happy for white children to suffer in silence as long as nobody criticizes the multicultural society. That's clearly your point. Now, you'll argue that it's not, but I can see in the chat, that's what everyone's saying. Not in your chat. I'm not watching your chat. I'm watching the general chat on Ralph's stream. But people in the chat on Ralph's stream, that's the point people are making. Do you condemn these Pakistani Muslim groomers who did these horrible things? And why would you think the system would actively try to cover this up?
I condemn all racists, or not racists. I condemn all. Well, I condemn racists too, but I condemn all rapists. I generally think if you rape people, I think that it's generally a bad thing. So back to my earlier question: how do you decide which members of parliament you trust versus which ones you don't trust? What makes her so special? The
point that I made earlier. The point that when she finally admitted to the truth. She, like everyone else that we've spoken of earlier...
Wait, how do you know that was the truth? Do you understand that you put yourself in a world where if a politician says something you agree with, it's the truth? Okay, observable, common sense, it's self-evident.
Do you know what? You're like this? I'm just going to say this.
Yeah.
I could say on this stream that falling into the blades of a combine harvester would be a bad thing. And you would ask me for some kind of scientific or learned report to prove that with data.
Yeah. And do you think the anti-intellectualism makes the point stronger?
Clearly, falling into a combine harvester is a bad thing, but you'd be like, where's the data?
You know why I actually know that you're incorrect? Is because I saw a lot of the reports coming out of those rapes, and I saw that they were all white men.
They weren't white men.
I saw them. I saw those reports. They were all white men.
People, he's lying to you.
No, I'm not lying. I saw them with my own eyes. I saw the reports. They were white men. You didn't see that?
And when you're on the back foot, this is one of your tactics. It then reduces it to a mockery.
No, I'm trying to illustrate the absurdity of your evidence. So let's say that both of us disagree. Let's say that
one at a time. Hold on.
Put up with that.
One at a time.
They shouldn't.
Go ahead, Destin. Let him go ahead, and then we'll go.
Let's say we both disagree on what we've observed. How would we reconcile as two men of society, of culture, that have brains that we can use? How would we reconcile our observed differences here? What would we appeal to figure out who's right or who's wrong?
Well, number one, the first thing we would actually do, and I've been on the ground in these places, so I actually know the truth. I've actually worked within these communities. I've seen the damage this has caused. You only have
you seen anybody getting raped?
No, hold on.
Have I seen anyone getting raped?
Then what the fuck? What does this have to do with anything?
What it has to do with is the fact you are reducing the suffering of these people to a complete mockery. You're sitting there snickering when it's white girls getting raped. And I'm doing this for a reason, because obviously your people, the people watching your stream over on your YouTube channel, they're not going to agree with me. But this is a very, very illustrative point. I'm talking about these horrific crimes, and you're sat there snickering. And you're snickering because it's white girls and white people suffering. You would not be snickering away now if this was white men doing this to black children.
If somebody was making an argument as ridiculous as the argument you're making, I would be snickering no matter what the supposed victim or perpetrator were. That's great. That's because you don't know who I am. You don't know what my background is. You have no idea. I've laughed about all sorts of stuff. You don't know who you're talking to, respectfully, okay? But I understand why you might think that.
Oh, I do know who I'm talking to.
What I'm laughing at is the ridiculous argument that I've seen some reports, therefore, I have a better idea of what's happening, and I don't need to read any silly studies or any silly commission that might have actually gathered all of the police data and looked at the charges and looked at the abuse reports and looked at the victim reports. But instead, because I saw a few things that popped across my feed on the Daily Mail, and because there's one MP that said something that I agree with because I already agree with what she's going to say because this is my ideological narrative, that you somehow think that this is like a good argument. I don't know how you can't see that you're falling into the exact same trap that any person does, where they surround themselves with certain types of media and they only read the things they want to read and they only hear the things they want to hear. And then when I push you just slightly, because I don't know anything about this topic, I just Googled to see what would come up. And I'm finding that there were big studies done, or at least one big one by the Home Office, that said the majority of the rapists were white. I think it said 87% or 84% were white, and 87% of the normal population is white. So maybe a small underrepresentation of white people, but still the vast majority were white. And then when I ask you, do you have anything that pushes back against this? Because I'm genuinely curious. And you go, well, I saw a lot of Daily Mail articles. You must understand, I can't possibly agree with that, right? I can't agree with your position, though. You've given me nothing.
Ralph was the one who brought up that. I cited the Rotherham case. I cited testimony from people who have left the police force. I cited testimony from a member of parliament. And I said, if you look at the names of the men, the names and the ethnicities of those who have been tried for this, it is not 85% white. You can see that. You only have to look at the data and actually look at it with your eyes, and you will see that. But what you like to do is you like to, move away from this, because this isn't something where you feel comfortable because it's, again, white people being the victims of the multicultural society. And not only is it white people being a victim of it, put that to one side now. Put that to one side. This has been known that it's a huge cover-up. There's been a cover-up by the police, a cover-up by social services. There has been a cover-up by local government. The issue, if you put aside the horrific issue of the rapes and just focus on the cover-up, that is what I'm talking about when I talk about intentionality. I'm talking about the fact that the system itself, police, social services, the government, etc., will actively cover up crimes against white people to protect the multicultural society. And
why did this scandal ever get out then, if that was always the goal? How did it ever make it? Why were any minorities ever arrested ever then?
Because when you have something as big as this, eventually things seep out, and eventually there is pressure put on, and eventually,
why couldn't they just keep deplatforming people?
Because when too many people know about something, it comes to the fore. And this did come to the fore. But there had been a massive cover-up before this happened. And there are a lot of people in Britain who have campaigned on this. There are a lot of charities that have sprung up. There are a lot of people who push back against it. And the people who push back against it, I don't like all the people who push back against it. I don't get on particularly well with Tommy Robinson. But he pushed back against this. He exposed a lot of it. And he was deplatformed. He basically had his life ruined because he spoke out against these grooming gangs. Now, I don't get on with the fella. He doesn't particularly like me because I say things about certain groups that he fetishizes, but he is right about grooming gangs, and he lost everything because of it. And many people who were in social services, many people who were in the police, many people who were in local councils who did try to do something about this, lost their jobs or were basically completely silenced and hounded out. Because there is some intentionality here. In the same way that people are banned off social media, people are banned for blowing the whistle when white people become victims of the multicultural society. And I'm saying to you now, and to everyone here, not just the people supporting me, but the people supporting you, that when white people become a minority, they will be increasingly treated badly. They'll be treated worse and worse, and eventually they will be a hated minority who are picked on and are victimized. If this is happening to us now, when we are a majority, it is only going to get worse when we're a minority. And that's why I advocate for our interests and for white people to remain a majority here in Britain. This is our ancestral homeland, and I want us to remain a majority, and I don't want us to be victimized by this multicultural system.
Okay, so the stories that you're telling me are nice, but I think the fact of the matter is that you just don't seem to have a good understanding of the child sexual exploitation scandal. It seems like you're picking and choosing from a few Daily Mail articles that you've read. You've, in your mind, decided that the majority of the rapists were, I guess, Pakistani or from the Indian, I don't know where you said they come from, but mainly men from that Asian part of the world. But there's just, I can't find anything to support this. So, I mean, like, if you think that is the case, that's fine. But I mean, it sounds like you're just as like dug into your particular little media bubble as anybody else might be dug into their particular media bubble. It sounds like there was a real scandal, but it sounds like the majority of the people that were raping these people were white men, even though you might have seen 14 names, or you might have seen other people like, oh my God, I saw 10 different people that raped them that weren't white. That doesn't establish a trend for what you had originally talked about, which was the hundreds of thousands or millions of white women that were being raped. It seems to be the case that there were a lot of rapists. They weren't all Asian. They weren't all from India. They weren't all from Pakistan. I can't find anything to substantiate that. If there was a cover-up, which it seems like there was, that's pretty horrible. Obviously, these are bad things. People can cover up things for a whole lot of reasons. There's tons of people that have covered up a lot of dumb shit in their life, whether it's because they're protecting their jobs, whether it's because they're protecting their coworkers, whether it's because for whatever reason. But the idea that we would see police covering something up and instantly assume, oh my God, this is white genocide, or oh my God, this is an intentional pushing of the multicultural society to, I guess, rape or get rid of all white people, when there are so many people in positions of power that can push this narrative, that can ban people from that can do all of this, but somehow they couldn't keep this rape scandal from getting out. Like the organizations and the institutions you point to are somehow all powerful and they control every sector of society, but they're also somehow not when you don't want them to be, or there's this excuse that my mom used to say the same thing, that like, oh, well, you know, they have control of everything until they don't because some good person pushes through. But if this society is willing to go so far to control the narrative on so many levels, I don't know why they couldn't just silence one or two extra extra people to prevent something from leaking. But regardless, for all of this, I can't engage with your stories of I saw reports or I saw news articles, therefore this is a trend that's established.
But what you said is just, again,
if you want to move on to something different, in terms of like, here's what I'm going to do to establish the intentionality of white genocide, that's fine. But unfortunately, like every single conspiracy theorist I've ever talked to, all you're going to give me is this disparate collection of facts, and you're going to try to tell me a story with these facts, and all of the facts you're giving me aren't even necessarily substantiated or true. So I mean, like, I don't, and we still haven't, even if I were to agree with every single thing you've said so far, which I don't, and some of what you've said is clearly incorrect, you haven't established that there was an intentional cover-up for the purpose of white genocide. It could literally just be a bunch of people trying to cover their asses because they know they fucked up at some point and they don't want to get in trouble for it. You still haven't gotten to like, here's the white genocide. And there are still all these different players involved that aren't intentionally doing white genocide. So I don't know where this top-down drive comes from, where we're getting the message pushed from to get rid of the white people. I don't understand. That hasn't been demonstrated at all.
Well, that was a lot of words spoken very quickly. But the fact is, the people who have spoken out against the things I've talked about have been deplatformed, and that is all part of what I've said. I've talked about the deplatforming. I've talked about people who've been sacked. I've talked about people who have broken the conspiracy of silence, that have lost their positions. I've talked about people who have basically been hounded out of every social network, people who have been publicly burnt in terms of their public position because they've spoken out against this. And I can read you this report here. Grooming gang convictions, 84% Asian. So that's 84% Pakistani Muslim. And this is from Sky News. The overwhelming evidence about this, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, I'm going to move on because obviously you're not going to accept it, but the overwhelming
Hold on, to be clear, what you just cited, this was the guess from that one study or from the one dig before the Home Office actually did their massive report, because I think that came out in 2020, and I just looked up what you're talking about. This came from 2017, right?
So what I'm saying is the overwhelming majority of evidence says that this is people from Pakistani Muslim backgrounds doing this to white girls, and it is in some degree ethnically motivated. Now, the fact of the matter is, this has been covered up. There are a huge number of victims, and I am stating that I believe it has been covered up because the system protects the multicultural society at any cost, even if that cost is hundreds of thousands of white girls being raped, because multiculturalism, to the people in charge, has become like a god. It's become like this holy shibboleth which can't be criticized. Anyone that does goes off social media, and anyone that does something from an ethnic minority background that could compromise the multicultural society, that something has to be covered up. And in this case, we've had the cover-up of hundreds of thousands of rapes of white girls, which you will obviously minimize. You will minimize their suffering. You will try to worm it round in a different way, like you always do, because you believe in the current system and its objectives. And I am not saying that this one thing alone proves intentionality, but what I'm saying is when you add it to the deplatformings... Hold on, wait. What were the hundreds of... When you say hundreds of thousands, are you still talking about that...
Are you talking about the same scandal, the Rotherham child sex scandal?
Rotherham is just part of this.
Okay, because you keep saying hundreds of thousands, but then you're referring to the specific event that was only 1,400
in one
people.
single town, one tiny town. Right. Yeah, that's how bad this is, that in one tiny town you have that many people suffering. And this has been something that's been covered up. And there's a huge amount of evidence talking about the cover-up. And the cover-up has been to protect the multicultural society. And what I'm saying is, and this is what you don't seem to be taking in, that if the government weren't caring more about the multicultural society than they were about the majority, they'd have stopped this. But it was covered up to stop people criticizing multiculturalism, because the government, the establishment, social media, big business have a objective, and that objective is to bring about multiculturalism. And when you bring about these multicultural societies, white people become a minority, which is intentionality. They are protecting a system that discriminates against whites and reduces white people to a minority.
Okay. Do you have like any other like causal links or any other types of things that shows like some intentionality, or is this how we're working?
Well, I was going to ask about the intentionality next. And this is towards Mark, and we can work off that. But what is the overall goal of reducing the white population? And we could talk about maybe some of the disagreement among whites. Some whites don't seem to care or whatever about their racial solidarity or what have you versus other races where it does seem to be more of a priority. But the first part, what would be the goal of reducing the white population? Like, what would be the motive, I guess?
Well, I think the motive behind this is largely based on a hatred for white people as an ethnic group. The powers that be, those that are in charge of this globalized system, do not like white people very much. They think that white people may one day advocate for their interests and turn against globalization, push back against that. And their intention is basically to get rid of white people as a homogenous ethnic group so that white people cannot advocate for themselves or ever be a problem to those who are at the top of the tree. And I'm not saying that everybody all the way down the tree are all involved, but I'm saying that people at the very top of the tree have a deep-seated dislike for homogenous European societies and have demonstrated that in every European nation by importing hundreds of thousands of immigrants every year against the wishes of what is still the white majority. And you see that in Britain all the time. In Britain, every time there is a general election, the Conservative Party usually do quite well. They usually win general elections, and they win it on the basis, or one of the bases, that they always say they're going to clamp down on immigration and never do. We live in an illusory political divide where both parties essentially claim to stand for different things but really stand for the same thing. And ultimately, both bring about mass immigration against the interests, but more importantly, the will of the people who, when polled or when usually vote or usually say in polls that they don't want more immigration. And that's another important point, that white people demonstrate in numerous ways that they are not pro-multiculturalism en masse, they are not pro-immigration, but they have these things forced upon them. But because they're caught in this two-party system, there is no real way out for the average person who doesn't understand the trap they're caught in.
Now, do you want to respond to that, Destiny? You have a question off that or anything to say?
I get, like, the problem with all of these types of conversations that somebody presents a conspiracy theory. It's essentially a story of a bunch of facts that are collected, but there's like nothing for me to actually like prove or disprove. Like every single thing that he talks about could be like adequately demonstrated by the fact that there are a lot of people that feel bad about a history that white people have had oppressing certain groups of people. So people have moved in like different cultural directions to try to rectify that. Like whether you think that is cringe or not, it's just as valid an explanation. And it doesn't require me to believe in any sort of grand overarching narrative that he can provide absolutely zero evidence for, rather than me trying to infer from a whole bunch of different little like factoids or stories that there's some intentional thing going on. I can just look at like what's obviously happening. It seems like a lot of white people, for whatever reason, feel like different groups of people were fucked up with white people in the past and are trying to make right. Whether they're going too far or not, there's valid conversations to be had there, but I don't think that that's enough to conclude that there is some grand conspiracy happening. Like when it comes to writing public policy for any country in the world, it's so difficult to do anything, whether it's to get people to not commit crime, whether it's to get people to have more children, whether it's to get people to do a certain thing. Like getting anything done with public policy to guide any sort of behavior is an incredibly difficult thing to do. Usually it has to be done through economic means. You can't just like tell people to do things and then like socially guide somebody one direction. So the idea that there is some top-down conspiracy or some bottom-up conspiracy or whatever to try to move everybody in one cultural direction, it would be the most successful project undertaken in all of human history when it comes to guiding thought, not only in one country, but in the entire Western world, to get every single white person to be on board with advocating against their own beliefs or advocating against their own self-interest. There are just a million other more plausible explanations than the fantastically delusional one of white genocide.
Well, no, not really, because what you're saying here is that white people haven't been beaten into hating themselves, but they are. White people are told to hate themselves. They're trapped within a political system that dispossesses them of power. And not only are they trapped within that political system. But that political system promises them things, then never delivers on it, which again shows intentionality. Children are taught in school to hate themselves. We see critical race theory. We see white privilege being taught in schools. We get told, white children get told all the time, that their ancestors were evil, that history was dominated by wicked white men, that white people went all over the world and oppressed everyone and did terrible things to them. White people are taught self-hate constantly. And part of this is a mental assault on whites to make white people from as young as age as possible hate themselves, hate their history, hate their traditions, hate their heritage, hate their culture. And when a people are dispossessed and separated from their tradition, their culture, their heritage, their ancestors, they are left isolated, they are left atomized, they are left self-harming, they are left self-flagellating, and they are more open to destroying themselves. No other racial group is taught to hate themselves. White people are. Again, that in itself, on its own, taken in a vacuum, maybe doesn't prove intentionality. But when you put it into the picture that I am painting, it is another important part of that picture that proves there is intentionality, because multiple things are all happening at the same time, which shows this is not a one-off isolated incident. And it's happening all over the Western world. It's not like there's 2 or 3 Western countries that, push back against that. I mean, there's the odd one in Eastern Europe, but they are constantly being influenced against pushing back in any way. But in countries like Britain, in countries like America, children are taught to hate themselves. White children aren't taught that they're the equal of blacks. Blacks are the equal of whites. White children are now taught that basically they're demons in human skin whose ancestors are responsible for all the ills of the world, which is not only not true, but leaves a dramatic mental impact on these children and makes them hate themselves. And self-hate is surely a recipe for the destruction of a people.
All of the things that you've described, though, whether they're implemented at the school level, the company level, or the national level, can just as adequately, if not more so, be explained by white people that have been really taken in with ideas related to social justice. The idea that it is undeniable that white people have, throughout most of history, been in positions of oppressor or owner of other groups of people. It's not really surprising that at some point people become more socially aware that they decide to, okay, well, for the rest of the world that believes that slavery existed, right? There are going to be groups of people in the Western world that are white that think, hey, maybe we should do something to make amends for this. Now, again, if you want to debate any particular policy, or if you want to say whether we should or shouldn't do this thing, that's something that I would be interested in discussing. But the idea that you can take a collection of white people that are trying to do something to elevate or do something to make amends to other groups of people that they feel were oppressed in history, and then to try to turn around and say, well, actually, they don't actually care about that at all. They're just trying to do white genocide. There's nothing for me to argue with there. Like, when it comes to the little collection of facts you're giving me, for the most part, I agree with a lot of these that, like, yeah, we do try to push certain types of education. Yeah, we do try to uplift certain groups of people more than others. I agree with all of these things, but all of these motivations can be adequately explained with, hey, we were white people, we did some pretty fucked up shit before, and now we're trying to make amends for it, rather than, hey, we need to genocide all white people. There's nothing for me to grapple with there. I have nothing. What you're about to do is you're about to restate every single thing you just said. You're about to give me a collection of things that white people do to make them hate themselves, and you're going to say, therefore, white genocide. I'm going to give you the same response I just gave you right now. So go for it, Mark.
I'm going to go for it. All people of the world, regardless of race or ethnicity, have both owned slaves and been owned as slaves. All people of the world. The only racial group as a whole that turned its back on slavery and abolished it were white people. White people didn't go to Africa rounding up Africans with their swords and their spears. White people went to Africa and they bought slaves from African slave traders. The most powerful African nations were built on slavery. They were actually built on basically conquest. They captured other black nations. They invaded other black nations. They captured blacks from other black countries, and then they sold them to white slave traders. It was white people who used huge amounts of their resources, huge amounts of troops, spent huge amounts of money, not only abolishing slavery in white countries, but combating slavery on a global level. And if you look at the most brutal slave trade, it wasn't the transatlantic slave trade. It was the Arab slave trade, where Arabs went to Africa, took Africans by force, and people ask today, well, why isn't there large numbers of Africans living in Arab countries as the descendants of slaves? That's because the Arab slave traders chopped off the genitals of every black man they took, so that they couldn't breed, they couldn't fight back, and they wouldn't be virile or ever take over their nations. Now, the fact is, if you put that in context, what I've just said, white children should surely be taught in schools, well, the whole world was a dark place, slavery was the norm, but your ancestors, your white ancestors in these white countries like Britain poured all their resources, time, effort, military might into not only abolishing slavery in the West, but abolishing it on a global level. But instead, your basic and ill-educated take is that white people were evil, must slavery. Not even true. That is part of the anti-white narrative.
So I've never said that white people were uniquely owning slaves. Slavery has been practiced about the entire world. It's my understanding every group has participated in to some extent. But I think that white people were in a unique position to benefit from slavery, such that those countries advanced far faster than most of the other countries that did enact slavery policies, I guess. So when you look at the United States, you look at Western or Northern Europe, these are places that exploded off the backs, oftentimes of imperialistic behavior, oftentimes of the exploitation of foreign colonies, oftentimes at the expense of slaves in their country. When you want to say that white people were the only ones that abolished slavery, yeah, sure, after they had grown massively while benefiting off the backs of slavery. It just so happens that the other people that were utilizing slaves didn't happen to grow to the same level that white people slaved.
What about the Ashanti Empire in Africa?
Not concerned about whatever empire in Africa you're going to bring up probably didn't match the height of the American empire in the 1800s. That's going to be my guess. I might be wrong. Maybe you're about to point out to me that there is a Wakanda that exists in Africa that I'm uneducated about, but I'm pretty sure that is true, that white countries grew in both military might and economic might and social power far faster than any of the other civilizations that were utilizing slaves in order to grow. So it's not surprising to me that these places that have advanced into highly industrialized, highly educated places would become a bit more cognizant of the sins of the past and have tried to make up for that through a variety of means before other countries that are still impoverished have. So, yeah, none of this, again, is an argument towards white genocide. It's just an alternate retelling of history where you try to cast white people as the good guys because they're the ones that happen to industrialize quicker and grow out of their slave-based economy.
Whoa. So white people pouring their money, time, military resources into stopping slavery, not just in their own countries, but on a global level. And slavery still exists in Africa today. It doesn't exist here in Britain. There's not an industrialized system of slavery. You can't go down to your local market and buy a slave. You know, in Britain, well, you probably will be able to in 30 or 40 years' time, but not at the moment. But the
white people slaves, right? Of course.
Yeah, we put all of that time, effort, money, and military might into stopping slavery. Surely white children should be taught that their ancestors did something great. But instead, they're taught that their ancestors were the bad guys. Why is that? On its own, why do you think not be the smoking gun? Put it in that bigger picture, and you can see white children taught to hate themselves, and not taught to hate themselves with honesty, but with lies.
Why do you think white people put so much effort into stopping slavery?
White people put so much effort into stopping slavery because white people are socially conscious.
Do you think that there might have been some economic incentive when engaging in trade deals with other countries to make sure that they have some minimum level of labor protection so that they're not harming their own native workforce? You don't think that many of that had any? You think it's just white people are socially conscious and like, we're going to go and save the world? You white really believe that?
Just stop slavery in their own nations. They put huge amounts of money and military might into stopping them in other nations. And if you actually read into this, white empires, such as the British Empire, went to African nations and did their best to dissuade African kings and African rulers from maintaining a slave-based economy. That wasn't done because we were evil people.
So why does any slavery still exist in African nations at all today then? Why don't we just go and stop it then if we have so much military might to do it?
we do our best to stop slavery. White people have done their best throughout history to stop slavery. That is a fact. If you
think we're doing our best right now to stop
the British Empire spent combating slavery on a global level, that was an unprecedented effort to prevent slavery. It was an unprecedented effort to stamp it out. Yet British children are taught that instead of being proud of their ancestors for doing that, they should hate their ancestors because their ancestors are actually
we literally still trade with countries that like utilize slave labor essentially to produce their goods and services. I just don't understand where you think this like moral superiority of the white race comes from.
Well, I just explain where the moral superiority comes from. That we are the only people on a racial level that rejected slavery across the whole of the Western world. We rejected slavery.
Once our economy was adequately well. We after a war we did, right, but we also only did so after building up our economy pretty sufficiently on the backs of slaves. Like once we hit like certain levels of industrialization, we were able to replace a lot of the slave labor with other sorts of technological means. We were able to do it. But who's to say that any other group of people wouldn't have had they had the same opportunities? I just think it's kind of silly or
that's a silly point, isn't it? You're saying other people would have done it eventually, but they didn't. We did it, and that's the point. We did it, and that should be taught in schools. If you're teaching,
do you think that we do? First of all, we do. Wait, do you think they don't teach about like
historical accuracy?
Do you think
You'd rather just teach white kids to hate themselves
about like Abraham Lincoln in school? What do you mean we don't like? How do you think we talk about how slavery ended in the United States? Of course, we teach this in schools.
Why you started this on slavery, and your opening gambit on the issue of slavery was that white people were the big bad guys, and we somehow had to sort of repent for our past as the big bad guys. And I came in and said, actually, the truth of slavery, when taken on a global level, is very different. I'm
not saying that we had to repent. I'm saying, who do you think benefited the most from slavery?
Who do I think benefited the most from slavery?
Is it the wandering African tribes, or is it the United States that has the largest military in the world? Don't weasel out. Who benefited the most from it? Do you think it was generally white countries or black countries?
People who owned slaves benefited from slavery, and they existed all over the world. Arab nations, Arab rulers benefited from slavery.
Which race of people do you think benefited the most from slavery?
I don't think it was white people.
Who was it then?
It's not white people.
Okay, well, who was it then? I'm curious.
White people aren't benefiting the most from... I don't know who benefited the most, but it definitely wasn't us, because we're the ones who are told to hate ourselves, even though we're the ones...
How can you know that it wasn't white people? You don't know who it was.
Beating down over something that we were minority stakeholders in.
Who... I don't know how you can say that white people...
If you ask who benefited the most, well, if you look at the white people that owned the slave ships, I would... possibly disagree that you should define them as white.
Okay. So you disagree that white people benefited the most from slavery. I'm guessing you don't want to say black people benefited the most from slavery.
I just, in a roundabout way, to save your YouTube channel, said who I think benefited the most from slavery.
YouTube channel. Okay. Okay, well, what else do you want to talk about?
Well, I think this was very indicative of your mindset. So you don't think that white children should be taught anything about the role their ancestors played in ending the slave trade, and shouldn't be proud of the fact that their ancestors made that bold move ahead of anyone else and made a global stand against slavery? You think it's right?
I think we probably should be taught how slavery ended in the United States. That's perfectly fine. Seems a little bit weird to be ultra proud of it, though, when it was only after we built up a ton using slaves. But I mean, yeah, obviously we should be taught history for what happened. Slavery
has been the human norm. We are living in an exceptional time where slavery isn't the human norm anymore. We broke a human norm that had existed from the beginning of time.
That's great that we did it once we had grown massively from it. Do you think it was a coincidence that it was the more industrialized North that was able to fight against the more agriculturally based South in order to end slavery? Like, yeah, we did it, but I'm just saying it's a little bit weird to try to like take so much credit for it after massively benefiting from it or profiting from it. Like,
many people massively profited. And as I said, the group of whites that massively profited
why do you keep saying many? You keep broadening my point. I can't understand how you don't see it. Might be a little bit cringe to be like, oh my God, we were so great. We ended slavery. Yeah, sure. It's like, well, fuck, I don't want to offend you.
We were so great. We took. And
it's like saying Hitler was a great man because he killed Hitler. Like, the argument doesn't really work well.
No, because white people didn't invent slavery. We've been around this one. Slavery was the accepted ignore.
Sure, Hitler didn't invent Hitler. I'm just saying that's great. I understand. We're not talking about who invented slavery. We're talking about the civilizations that massively profited from it. And it seemed like a lot of white civilizations that were highly imperialistic.
A lot of civilizations benefited from it.
Sure, but the most successful ones seem to be the white ones that were leveraging slaves for a lot of early labor.
Well,
no, wait, hold on. Are they punished for using like slavery, just having it at a key moment, right? When industrialization came in, you know what I mean?
Ralph with a based point.
Well, you know what I mean? Like if they kind of just were doing the slave thing, like right at the right time when it really paid to have some slaves, and you can kind of project that way, right? Like it wasn't a new thing.
I'm just saying it's a little bit weird. It's like pulling your dick out of somebody after you've finished them, and you're like, you know what? Now that I'm done raping this person, rape is pretty fucking bad, and I'm going to take a strong stance against it. Like, I mean, that's great that we did. That's a complete it absolutely is valid. Come on, there's a reason why the people that were fighting against slavery were literally the more industrialized North versus the more agricultural South. Like, there's a reason why it was only once white civilizations had hit a certain level of capital being able to outperform human labor that they were so much easier to push against slavery.
Well, maybe not industrialization, not the right word, but more modern.
Awesome that we did, but I'm just saying that like it's a little bit hard to like gloat around and take a lot of credit for it when you've used tens of millions of slaves prior to that. It comes off as a little bit
how many slaves, because you see the slaves that went to America in the transatlantic slave trade were dwarfed by the slaves that went to Arab nations, but we don't teach that in schools either. We don't teach about the brutality of the Arab slave trade. Why not put it all in context, all in proper historical context for children? Why just teach white children what you started with, that they should be, feel bad about it, the whites are the bad guys?
Is somebody in here defending the Arab slave trade?
No, but when you
talk
about a historical event and you take certain parts of that out of context to make a particular group of people look like the bad guys when they really weren't, that needs talking about. And what you're doing is going along with that narrative. And I'm saying there shouldn't be narratives taught in schools in the West that make white kids hate themselves. It's simple. I think it's part of the white genocide plan.
Okay, so I'm American, so we probably are going to majorly spend most of our time learning about America and probably Europe as part of our history in the school system here. If you want to talk about like Arab slavery, or if you want to talk about like the idea that I have to talk about every single bad thing that every single other group of people did before I talk about a single bad thing that my group of people did, points to a really fragile attitude. I think you can absolutely, the context is American history in an American classroom, not the history of the world and every single lesson about how America might have done something bad at one point in time. Okay. So yes, so we absolutely can teach bad things that happened, I guess, with the Arab slave trade. We can teach bad things that happened with the American slave trade. It's okay to say, hey, we did some bad things at some point in time. It doesn't mean we have to hate ourselves. It doesn't mean we have to hate our country. It doesn't mean we have to say we were uniquely bad and nobody else did it.
Oh, God. Why?
Careful, you're squeaking.
White children. It's just absurd.
I know. The squeaking is loud. Go ahead.
White children are taught that they should dislike themselves because they're taught to hate their ancestors. They're taught that their ancestors were the bad guys. All of these things are, again, part of the same thing that I've been talking about all night. And again, this is a bad thing. And I believe it's child abuse. I believe that critical race theory, anti-white narratives, white self-hate being pushed on children is child abuse. And it's something that has a profound mental effect on whites.
Do you think
this self-hate might end up...
Is there any way that we can teach about the bad things we've done in American history, or do we have to just gloss all over those because white children will lose their fucking minds?
You put things into its correct historical context.
Okay, so the correct thing in the historical context would be the United States utilized slaves to build themselves up massively over 100 or so years, and other countries did the same. How does this change any of this? Wouldn't white people still hate themselves? Just like the Arabs that use slaves?
No, I don't want anyone to hate themselves. But I've not said I want anyone to hate themselves. I don't want black people to hate themselves. Don't want Arabs to hate themselves. Don't want Orientals to hate themselves. Don't want whites to hate themselves. But the people being taught to hate themselves are white, which again is part of the plan that I've been talking about all night. Black children in schools aren't taught to hate themselves. They're not taught to dislike themselves. Neither any other ethnic group. It is white people being taught to to hate themselves. And what I'm saying is, if you're presenting slavery, you first have to start from the point this was a global norm. Everyone was engaged in doing it. A minority of whites were engaged in doing it. But white people on a racial level rejected it before anyone else did.
How do you think we taught this in school? Where did the slaves come from? In school, did we just say that we we created like the orcs or whatever?
Where did the slaves come from? Where did the slaves come from?
Wasn't there like a whole triangle? Didn't we go down to Africa, I think, and in Northwest Africa grab some first? And
then probably some came. How did you grab them?
They were probably sold by other people that were capturing and selling slaves.
Other people? Who were the other people?
Probably other African tribe leaders or whatever.
So it wasn't just a big, horrible white conspiracy against the black world.
Mark, nobody else is saying that. Nobody is saying that. Nobody's saying that there was a grand white conspiracy to create slavery, okay? The Arab slave trade lasted for like over 1,000 years, okay? Nobody's saying you don't learn. It absolutely is taught in school.
So why don't schools put it into context? Schools don't put it into context.
You learn in a world history class, you're probably
to hate themselves.
Okay, I don't think that you're going to find a white history book that says, or an American history book about white slave trades that are like white people are evil or white people are uniquely bad. You learn where slaves came from. You learn that the rest of the world is engaged in slavery for a long time.
I wish we could rewind this and see how Destiny began this particular point, because he's literally on the back foot here.
How do you think I began this particular point?
You began this particular point by saying that when I started talking about white people, white children being taught to hate themselves in school, you smugly brought up slavery. And my exact words were, well, I'm going to school you about slavery in a minute. And this is how we got onto this. You seem to have forgotten all that. I don't know why. You've got a very short memory for what you said 5 minutes ago.
Great memory. If I'm losing any of it, it's just because you tend to ramble for minutes at a time, okay? While simultaneously accusing me of saying nothing while speaking so much, okay? What I said initially was that just because you're taught about your history does not mean you have to necessarily hate yourself for that history. Okay. And I brought up slavery as an example of this is something that is objectively bad that both Americans and white people broadly have engaged in. And now you tried to pull hold on. We stopped it, which is when I said that just because you stopped doing something bad doesn't make the bad thing not bad. And then you try to say, well, Arabs did it. Well, black people sold the first slaves. That's all true. And that's all dandy. And you learn about that. You learn about all the slave trades. And when you do world history or you do U.S. history, when you're in school, just because white people or Americans engaged in a certain type of slave trade doesn't mean that white people are taught to hate themselves. Doesn't mean you have to hate yourself. You can learn simultaneously about both the bad and good things you've done in your country without developing some amount of self-hatred.
But the point is, when children are taught about this, it's not taught in context. That's the point. And white children are being bombarded.
What do you mean in what context?
Look, we'll move along. You're going to keep asking me the same question.
So here's the context you want. This is what you want. Okay, I want you guys to know that a long time ago, okay, white people bought some slaves. But the first slaves that were sold, they were sold by black people. But Arabs had slaves way longer than that. And a lot of black people benefited from slavery. And white people were the first people that stopped slavery. And we went all over the world. Like, you're trying to paint everything in the most like preferential light possible. But that it kind of ignores the reality and the history of the United States. A black family that was enslaved in the United States in the early 1800s.
It's amazing.
There is no context. There is no context that makes the slave trade of whatever Arab empires relevant to the experience of an African American enslaved family in the United States.
What is the experience of it? What's the experience? Can you tell me now? What is the experience of some African American family in America today that are the descendants of slaves? What is their experience, Destiny? You tell me.
Well, it's going to depend on where you live, but there's typically a shared experience of not knowing what your ethnic origin is. So, for instance, when everybody is celebrating St. Patty's Day or whatever thing else, black people don't really have the ability to do that because oftentimes they don't know where they came from. Sometimes it's really awkward conversations where you're tracing your lineage and you're wondering why your last name is Washington or Jefferson, and you found out just because your great-great-great-grandma was raped by the person that owned your particular family. Sometimes it might be conversations about like, well, why do we live in a certain area, or why does our family, not have any intergenerational wealth? Why don't we own any property? Why don't we have any houses? Why don't we own any stocks? Why didn't I get anything from my great-great-grandpa? Well, because he was either somebody that was forbade from buying houses in certain areas, or it was somebody who was lynched by a white family. Like, there's a ton of different things that might be shared history to African Americans, meaning the descendants of slaves in the United States. Now, that's not to say that slavery didn't happen in other parts of the world, but to try to screech and scream, well, we can't talk about that because Arabs had a slave trade that lasted for 1,300 years, kind of misses the mark on why we talk about slavery in the United States.
What you've just said is the most disingenuous thing I have ever heard in my life.
Tell me why, Mark.
Because the descendants of the slaves who were transported from Africa to North America, the descendants of those slaves today, they're the lucky ones. They're the ones who are sat in houses with iPhones, with PS5s, with Nintendo Switches, watching Oprah on the sofa, getting their benefit payments, driving around in their big truck. They're not still in Africa. I don't think there's a single descendant of a slave in America today who would find it preferable living in Africa. And that tells you how that has worked out as a better deal for them.
If you were a wealthy white person from a Western country and you went to a poor or impoverished African or Asian country and you brought back a 9-year-old sex slave to the United States and they grew up to live in the United States, would you say that that was a lucky sex slave?
They weren't 9-year-old sex slaves.
No. I want you to engage with a hypothetical, Mark. I want you to engage with a hypothetical. So you bring back little Lucy from Laos or Vietnam or some really impoverished village in one of these areas. You bring her back, you rape her till she's 18, and then you set her free to live in the United States. Would you say that's one of the lucky ones? Can you answer that question?
No. Firstly, we're not talking about
you have to engage. You got to engage.
That wasn't what we were talking about.
You don't think any slaves? You don't think any slaves were ever raped by any?
Just gone to pedophilia.
Mine hasn't gone to pedophilia. Can you not understand hypothetical?
No, what I'm saying is that the black people transported to work on farms in America, their descendants will have a higher quality of life living in America today.
So do you think the descendants of that sex slave, do you think that her descendants will have a higher quality of life than what they would have if she would remain in whatever
slaves. They were brought over for farm labor.
That's regardless. First of all, a lot of the women were raped, but regardless of that.
Whoa. So you're saying now people brought to work on a farm is the same as somebody who's brought to work as a sex slave?
Mark, if it was the same, this wouldn't be called an analogy. It would just be the
but it's not an analogy, is it? What you've got is a false equivalence, which is certainly not an analogy, so you're wrong again.
How is it a false equivalence, Mark?
Because saying that somebody who is brought to work on a farm is enduring the same hardship as somebody who has been brought to
be locked in a cage and repeatedly raped.
It's a false equivalent.
I'm not saying it's not a false equivalence. I'm saying the same.
Today, Destiny, I'm going to ask you a question. Would you rather work on a farm or would you rather be tied up in a dungeon and sodomized to death? Which one, Destiny?
Sodomized to death? Do you think that's the only type of sex trade that exists? Do you think that nice work on the farm and a leisurely, I'm going to go pick some berries today for a master today? You think that's the only type of labor that works?
Being bummed by your master. Which one?
It's not relevant to the analogy that I'm giving, Mark. What I'm telling you is that the descendants of a particular person that was enslaved shouldn't be used to justify the initial harm done. So if I abduct somebody against their will and I give their children a better life, that doesn't mean that I don't owe somebody to the person who was initially abducted.
But why would you owe something? Because the whites in America today, there's no white alive in America today who's ever owned a slave, and no black alive in America today has ever been owned as a slave.
What I'm telling you is that there were a whole bunch of people that had a great injustice acted upon them. And while that injustice was enacted upon them, there was another group of people, white slave owners or white people in the United States that weren't slaves, that greatly benefited from those slaves. Now, it comes to be that wealth is often passed on from generation to generation, whether that's through direct transfers of wealth or whether that's through assets like homes that have been in some people's families for over 100 years, or whether that's through inherited political power like people like the Kennedys or businesses like people like the Rockefellers. A lot of these people could have never been black in the United States because our history wouldn't have allowed it, Mark. All I'm saying is that even if there are some black people that exist in the United States today that are better off than they would have been if they were born in Kenya or something, not all of them, doesn't necessarily mean that initial thing wasn't a harm or a wrong that was enacted on somebody, and it doesn't mean that there wasn't a group of people that benefited from it. This should be simple to follow.
No white person alive in America today has owned a slave. No black person alive in America has been owned as a slave. And the descendants of those slaves have benefited from their life in America. And at the height of the slave trade, it's something like 1.46% of free whites actually owned slaves. And when you talk about this generational wealth passed down, that is a tiny number of super rich sort of capitalist people who own those slaves.
It
wasn't a mass ownership of slaves.
No,
it wasn't like the Roman Empire.
The entirety of the United States benefited from slavery, not just the few people that owned slaves. If you need me to explain really basic econ to you, I can, but I'm pretty sure you understand this. You're either just willfully ignoring it or you are unimaginably ignorant about how economies work.
No,
so
I'm not.
All the white people in the United States benefit from slavery. When you talk about wealth passed on from one generation to the next, I'm not talking about owning like an entire state, or I'm not talking about owning a massive company. It could be something as silly as a house that's passed down from generation to generation, or it could be some stocks and bonds, or it could be a small family business. These are things that have come from family to family. And I know that this is really important to people like you because you talk about family values and how important, grandma and grandpa taking care of mom and dad and all. You talk about how important that all is. So I know that you know that this intergenerational wealth, not just money, but other assets are important. These are things that black families could have never passed down to their children because they were either legally forbade from doing so or their parents were legally forbade from doing so. And all I'm saying is that there seems to be some balance there where white people massively benefited from black people. Sure, white people might have ended slavery. Sure, white people might have, not engaged in it for as long as other people. But that transaction exists. And I think that it's reasonable that some people in the country are like, hey, maybe we should possibly do something to amend these types of imbalances. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. And I don't think that makes for white genocide.
Teaching white children to hate themselves is part of the bigger picture, and that is something that you haven't managed to contest despite all the other nonsense that you've babbled for the last, I don't know how many minutes.
You're saying I've babbled nonsense because you won't engage with anything I'm saying. Giant dialogue tree, you want to run down your memorized points and talk. That's why we were so excited to get to the reparations thing. Did you know that? No, I didn't know that, Mark, until you told me. I thought that there were still white people alive today that owned slaves, but it wasn't until you hashed out. It wasn't until you brought out that talking point. I was like, oh my God, I didn't even remember slavery ended in like the 1800s. I thought they were supposed to say. So thank you for that. I'm going to reconsider everything now. Maybe white genocide actually is happening because of the hundreds of thousands of people that you extrapolated from the 1,400 people that were raped in Rotterdam. And you totally changed my mind on everything. Thank you. So because of the news reports you saw, because of that one MP that you happen to agree with that left her position after saying some dumb shit based on a study from 2017 that contradicted the 2020 Home Office report. Like, you got me, dude. It's all part of the broader picture, basically. I understand.
Yeah, it is part of the broader picture. Mm-hmm. And to take it back to where we started, tonight I have pointed out lots of different effects on white people, things that are happening to white people that when placed in a larger context shows there is an intentionality to not only reduce white people to a minority, but to make white people hate themselves, to influence white people in a negative way, to reduce white people to second-class citizens. And if you can take any one of those things and place it in a vacuum, it might be a one-off. But when you take all of those things together and you see that they're all happening simultaneously in all these different Western nations at the same time, there is clear intentionality. And it is not a conspiracy that white people are being reduced to a minority. It is not a conspiracy that the media back this and celebrate this. It's not a conspiracy theory that social media ban people from talking about it. There is a conspiracy at foot, but it's not a conspiracy theory. It's not a theory. It's actually happening. And that's been ably proved tonight. And when people like myself do speak out against these things and advocate for white people, we are deplatformed, we are pilloried, we have our lives ruined because, again, there is a conspiracy against people who are willing to advocate for the rights of white people, a conspiracy that does not affect any other racial group. And this is seen at every level.
All right. To be clear, also, just by your definitions, everybody is being reduced more and more as more mixed race people become a thing, right? Black people are being reduced, Asian people. Wait, why? How not? If all of these people are getting into intermarriages more and more and more.
I explained this at the beginning because I explained.
Well, I'm not saying there's an intentional thing, but
are you saying wait?
Every group is being lesser and lesser and lesser because they're becoming mixed race.
I mean, I guess he said, are you saying this that basically because they're treated as black anyway?
A mixed race person doesn't count as either race. So
yeah, but he's saying the media, the culture treats them as black anyway. Is that what you're getting at?
You understood that. You understood that, Ethan. The chat understood that. Ethan. Destiny didn't understand that.
No, I'm asking if that's what you meant. Right? That is what you meant, though. Right? Yeah, okay.
Thank you for bringing me home on that one.
Thank you for bringing it up.
I'm sure that Mark in the future, whenever he's referring to somebody that's black, he's going to say, well, I don't know if they're black. That could be a mixed race person. I'm not sure. I'm sure that Mark engages in that type of discourse in his day-to-day life or his day-to-day political analysis.
All right, now we have some super chats here that I'm going to ask too. I think we've fulfilled everything pretty much, but we'll do closing statements too, of course. And any callers, if you want to jump in real quick, we might take some quick callers.
Just a real quick, Ethan. If anything is like TOS breaking, I have to.
I can.
If anything's terms of service breaking, if you spit any truths, if you say anything that might offend the censors, Destiny doesn't want to lose those sweet YouTube bucks.
We say a lot of offensive things here. We say a lot of truth things here that are hard truths, but we can do all of it without having to getting banned somehow. It seems like it's possible to do it. Maybe one day.
Well, allegedly, but I respect that. All right, I'll keep it as clean as I can. K-Max McDonald says, for Destiny, when the Hassan Piker segment of the left brags about white people disappearing, do you feel he is fanning the flames? If the numbers go down, do you feel the rhetoric could be changed? Twitch streamers memed in 2016, but now say, fuck white people. I hate white people. They're quoting them. I hate white people. Anti-white slurs are fine, according to them now. Should this stop?
Yeah, I think it's super cringe. I'm glad that Twitch actually surprisingly took a stance against it. They started banning people using cracker as an insult. I thought that was funny. I think that all of the fuck white people and the Mayo side and the white genocide shit is ultra cringe and should stop immediately. I think it should be treated the same as any other kind of racist attack.
All right, K-Max McDonald again. I'll kick it to Mark, and you can answer this next, though, Destiny, because it's for both. It says for both. Economics is always mentioned for immigration, but what about culture? Whenever I attend a large party, most immigrant groups just stay among themselves. Thus, you see enclaves in societies such as all Korean neighborhoods, Pakistani ones, Chinatown, etc. Does this promote social trust? And I'll let Mark start, and then Destiny.
Well, this is an interesting point, and I'll actually pause the game I'm playing here to answer it. The fact is, when you see small amounts of people moving into an area, and those people are vastly outnumbered. So say you have a small number of people come from the Indian subcontinent to a British town, and they are vastly outnumbered. They then have to learn the language, they have to adopt the culture, they have to learn the ways of the locals, and they have to do this because otherwise they won't fit in. But once you bring thousands and thousands of people from the same area of the world to that small British town, those people no longer have to fit in. They no longer have to learn the language, and they don't have to adopt the culture. They no longer have to learn the ways of the locals, and they create their own little society inside a society, and they essentially import their culture, their way of life, to the exclusion of the locals. That's why when you go to certain British towns where there's been this mass immigration, you don't see an actual mixing of people. What you see is different ghettos, and when those ghettos arise with certain particular racial groups, whites that live on the edge of those ghettos or live alongside those groups then become victimized by the new racial majority, who, as I said, largely then rejects speaking English. And you can see what's happening here. These people come here, they take over part of an area, they more or less terraform it, for want of use of a better phrase. They import their culture to the exclusion of that of the indigenous people, and they turn that little part of Britain into a mini Pakistan or a mini Bangladesh. And what's the big difference between the mini Pakistan or mini Bangladesh that they've created here in Britain and Pakistan or Bangladesh where they've come from? Well, benefits, education, healthcare, etc., etc. But culturally, they're the same. So these people aren't actually coming here because they want to be part of our nation and integrate and become part of what we are. They're coming here to basically game the system and to move part of their country here, which is to the detriment of us. And this happens an awful lot. So when you see this mass movement of people, the problems get massively compounded. And where a small amount of immigration could be tolerable in very small amounts, the mass immigration we're seeing completely changes the character and sort of where a nation operates.
All right, go ahead, Destiny. Enclaves.
Do you want me? I can finish my game.
Oh yeah, okay. Put that.
So there have been large groups of people that have immigrated to different areas throughout all of human history. In the United States, we dealt with Irish and Italian immigrants that migrated in huge numbers. We've had Hispanic populations of the South migrate in huge numbers. I think that there are a couple things that we could do that I'm in favor of that maybe are more extreme in terms of like forcing some level of integration. I like the idea of everybody needing to speak the same language when they live in a country. I think that's a good idea for some level of cohesion. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with small areas of towns being like ghettos for certain populations of people, having a small German ghetto, an Italian ghetto, a Mexican ghetto, whatever, for groups of people that move in different areas. Every huge city has like a Chinatown, a Koreatown. I don't think these are the worst things in the world. I think that when it comes to the segregation of different communities in America, I think one of our biggest problems is the way that we do zoning. We don't have a lot of mixed use zoning. We have like suburbs everywhere that spreads everybody apart and kind of plays more into that separation of different groups of people. I think that if we had better, more cohesive cities, like a lot of Europe has, I think we'd probably do a little bit better. But I don't think for the most part, people coming in, bringing their culture, spreading their culture to other areas inside of the borders of a particular country is necessarily a bad thing. All of human history has been culture moving all over the world. Nobody is a little bubble that maintains their own culture, just grows on their own. Wars change culture. Weather can change culture. Different movies or songs can change culture. Like things evolve over time with, external, internal influence, whatever. That's just like the way of the world.
All right, now let's see here. Penguin says Destiny's word soup wasn't a match for Mark's painted picture. Let's see. Flashbang friend says, Destiny, you're older than me and don't know Obama allowed black home ownership to die through subprime mortgages during his time in office. People like Tim Dillon talked about issues involving that. Go watch Ryan Dawson work. Then he called you a Yankee, which I don't think you're a Yankee, really. I don't think
so black home ownership dying under Obama. So it was the policies leading up to Obama that led to the housing crisis, and black wealth in the form of houses were massively wiped out and didn't really recover post 2007. I don't know what kind of mental gymnastics you have to do to try to blame that one on Obama. But some Republicans do it. I've seen it happen before, but yeah.
McCarthy was right, says, my body is so ready for this. Thanks for getting such a great lineup together, big guy. Thank you so much, and I've enjoyed this very much, actually, as well, myself, so I agree with you. Thank you. Public Intellectual, and thank these gentlemen for coming on. Public Intellectual says, Jared Taylor was the first person YouTube banned, and he's as milquetoast as it gets. If these views were unpopular, they wouldn't have to ban them. I guess that would be directed towards you, Destiny. What do you say to that?
Platforms can ban things for all sorts of reasons. If they are enforced like hate speech policies or whatever, like I would have to see the particular reason why they're banned. 99% of the time, and everybody knows this because you're all friends with people on forums, whenever a friend comes up to you and is like, oh yeah, I got banned and I didn't do anything wrong, or like in League, you're like, oh really? Can I see the logs? What was the ban reason? It's always for some crazy shit that they didn't actually fess up to when they originally got banned. That being said, I'm sure there are people that get banned for reasons on these platforms that I don't agree with. I've been banned on a lot of these platforms for a variety of reasons. So, I'm sure that, there are probably some people that get banned for reasons why, they shouldn't be. But I mean, every platform has the right to enforce their own terms of service. And a lot of that, unfortunately, for some people excludes hate speech. And for some reason, a lot of people can't seem to advocate on behalf of white groups without also engaging in hate speech at the same time.
That's nonsense. The guy was pointing out Jared Taylor, who is a very, very gentle, gentlemanly, well-spoken guy who doesn't use racial slurs, who doesn't advocate for any violence. You know that. I know that. Ralph knows that. People in the chat know that. He was banned because he talked sense. People were viewing him too much, and the platform didn't like the fact he was popular. If he was unpopular and only 10 people were watching him, and the 10 people watching him all gave him downvotes, the platform wouldn't care. The platform only cares when people like Jared Taylor are popular and people overwhelmingly vote up their content. And when you have videos with millions of views with a 97% to 3% like to dislike ratio, the platform culling that is clearly saying to those millions of viewers, this isn't acceptable, but for no good reason.
All right, now let's see. There's a couple more here. Actually, let me read these off Entropy first. KMX McDonald, we got that in. Vipin87 says, I want to see Mel Gibson as Anne Frank. That's what he said. I'd probably watch that for sure. KMX McDonald says, when does Destiny feel segments of the left abandon class issues and totally focused on race? I hear Surfs TV constantly say all white people feel great as individuals based on their skin color. What about a poor white versus a rich non-white?
Yeah, anybody that openly identifies as a socialist or communist on the internet is a fucking moron. So don't listen to any of those people. The Surfs is a lot of stupid shit.
Yeah, I knew you weren't too hot on the Surfs. Actually, I knew where that was about to head. American Ascent says the YouTube apocalypse was driven by one journalist, Carlos Maza, LOL. It wasn't some big grassroots movement driven by mass public support. The vast majority of normal people didn't give a shit. That's what he said. British Gammon also said, well said, Mark. Let's see. Indigenous says, Destiny, I've got a peer-reviewed study that says... He says, it says you're a pussy, is what it says. Now let's see. I'm trying to look for questions too. Flashbang friend says, Honest Abe sent the army south to collect the revenue, not to free the slaves. Learn your history. He says, fair call out as well. Destiny has the Spanish flag colors behind him. Do you have those your Spanish flag colors? Then he says, can I get a fuck Hassan? Is what he said at the end. I don't know. Flashbang friend said, Destiny. Okay, we read that one. Let's see. There are a couple more over here and then a couple more TTS and then we'll do closing. Actually, there's a few that want to call in too if you guys have time. But K-Max McDonald says, does Destiny think that when China or Israel harms their minorities, our media and government is less quick to condemn them? Is this racially based? This is a good question, brother. Is this racially based because they are not white or a more financial motive? That's a good question too. China has been very harsh on the Uyghurs.
What was the question about why don't we condemn China as hard?
He
for
said,
the
do they think that our media is slower to condemn China or Israel when they mistreat minorities versus, stuff here? And is it racial or is there a financial motive behind it? Which was also a good follow-up question.
It feels like any time there is like an issue with a certain group of people, like different sides are claiming to clamor, like, about like who did what. So like when there's a shooting, people on the right desperately wanted to be a black person or Muslim. When it's on the left, people desperately wanted to be like a high school kid that shot up a place who's white. You'd be lying to say that like everybody doesn't play these games or trying to like claim or unclaim like certain types of shooters or violent people. It happens. It's cringe. I don't think you should do it. I encourage people not to do it. I fight with people that do it. But I think that when it comes to talking about other countries, it gets very strange. I know like on the left, there's a lot of mixed messaging over. So for instance, something like the hijab for Muslim communities. Some people on the left will say, well, if you're part of a religious group, you have a right to determination in terms of how you want to, play this out. Other people will say, well, no, it doesn't matter. The hijab is something that's necessarily discriminatory towards women, period. I don't know. I don't think that like the left is unified in terms of either condemning or not condemning certain groups of people for certain actions. Some people on the left want to hold the whole world to the same moral standard. Other people on the left want to make different exceptions for different communities. I don't think there's a unified answer on that.
Real quick follow up on that, Mark. You got anything to say on that, or no? It's mostly directed.
Well, of course, the media is by its nature anti-white. So whenever white people do anything, no matter how small, it's amplified. So if a white person does something that the media perceives to be bad, it is amplified massively. So if a white person went into a restaurant and didn't tip a black waiter, that could be national news. That could be a huge outcry. You could see something massive there. Whereas, if Israel decides to dispatch the helicopter gunships to machine gun Palestinian children on a beach, for some reason the media isn't so keen about covering that. And they're not so keen about covering that because of the people who own the media and the media's massive anti-white bias. So, of course, the media tries to turn any perceived injustice that whites perpetrate against non-whites into a national story, but equally bury stories where other racial groups act in ways which are often far worse than any white has or would ever act.
All right. Joe R. says the 85% statistic the Destiny quoted is in regard to all cases of CSE, not just grooming gangs. The report summary begins by discussing grooming gangs and then pivots in that paragraph to talking about all kinds of CSE, hoping no one will notice, is how they described it. And again, I haven't read the report, so I couldn't say one way or the other. Django Geek says, to Mark, we already teach about slavery in the most milquetoast, watered-down, contextualized way possible. If some white people still feel guilty about it, then that's on them, is how he described it. Now, also, let me see, before I turn on the text-to-speech, I'll look and make sure that they're not too crazy here. They seem to be okay. Also, there's a couple more on Odysee. I'll read those real quick, too. Holy smokes. Let me scroll down. Thank you guys for the support. Major support. Godzilla 37 says diversity is only in traditional white countries. Destiny. Are the Chinese about to be race mixed out? The Nigerians, the Egyptians? No. Then he's saying you're being disingenuous by not acknowledging.
What was it about? Like that other people aren't going to be race mixed out?
He said it's not a danger in those countries, I guess, that their main racial majority is going to be a minority, right? Like that they're staying on top.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't care. I don't speak for other countries or whatever. People will be like, oh, what about Japan or whatever? It's like, I don't know. There's a lot of like racial majority countries that try to maintain that. If they want to do that, knock themselves out. I don't care. I'm not here to speak for policies of other countries.
That is
the point he's making. The point he's making is that the drive to dispossess people of the nations they founded or their ancestral homeland overwhelmingly affects white people. It doesn't affect other racial groups. There isn't this mass. For example, there's not a huge international effort to make sure that Israel's a multicultural state where Jews are no longer the majority. That isn't happening. There's no massive effort to get people to move to black countries or countries in Asia. And
I don't think there's a massive international effort to force any particular country to change their, like, I don't think there's pressure from like European countries for the United States to change its immigration policy or whatever. Like,
well, there's massive pressures on Western countries to take migrants.
To take migrants or to take refugees. There's a difference between these things. I think that the pressures are generally internal to those countries. As an American, I can confidently say that nobody in America gives a fuck about what any European country has to say about our immigration policy. Absolutely.
They care about what a small group of Middle Easterners think about your immigration policy.
I don't think anybody in the United States cares about what Jewish people think about our immigration policy. Nobody in the United States says, okay, well, you don't know how the average American votes is pretty obvious, but.
Well, what about the politicians, though, versus the average American?
I think
politicians listen to what the average American voter is pushing for, and it's not generally for other groups to pressure you to change your immigration policy.
There are groups like IsraAid, which is a Jewish an Israeli refugee charity that exists not to bring refugees to Israel, but exists to help refugees reach Europe. Well, I find that very funny. I find it very interesting that Israel often, or people who are supporters of Israel, often weigh in on Western politics and tells the West how many migrants they should be taking, that open borders is good for them, that Europe should be multicultural.
Netanyahu, they don't talk about, they're talking about refugee policy sometimes, but maybe I've missed it, but I can't remember the last time an Israeli prime minister is saying to the United States, I think you need to up the number of Hispanic
I didn't say an Israeli prime minister. I said people who are supporters of Israel, or people within Israel,
Americans,
or policy, or people who try to influence policy, who are Jewish, always call for open borders for the West, but at the same time call for closed borders and an ethno-state for Israel. And what I'm saying is that
nobody is calling for an ethno-state in Israel. Nobody.
Israel is an ethno-state.
Israel is not an ethno-state.
It has the nation-state law enshrining Jews as a special group that should be set apart.
Jew is not an ethnicity. There are multiple ethnic groups within the Jew. Is it possible to marry into a Jewish family and then gain citizenship to Israel?
It's amazing, isn't it? Because
no. Answer that question. Answer that question. It's super easy. Yes or no. Can you marry into a Jewish family, become Jewish, and go to Israel?
If you claim Israeli citizenship, you have to prove that you are of Jewish heritage, and Jewish heritage is something that shows up on a DNA test.
No, and you're either lying or you're dead wrong. No. So tell me, can I marry a Jewish person and become Jewish and get an Israeli citizen? You don't think that's possible?
No, Jewish people who are Jewish, it's largely seen as being on the mother's side of the family. You have to actually prove Jewish heritage. You might be able to go there as a spouse or partner, but that doesn't make you Jewish.
It does make you Jewish. You can absolutely become Jewish, and it's not an ethno-state. Also, Jew is not an ethnicity. There are at least 5 distinct different groups of Jewish people.
Funny how they turn up on DNA tests, isn't it? And how leading rabbis in Israel suggest that DNA tests should be used as a prerequisite.
I would say you should go to Israel and maybe talk to some people, but I don't know if you'd be welcome there. But no, there are absolutely different groups ethnically of Jewish people. There are at least 4 or 5 different distinct groups, and this is true because even in Israel, different Jewish ethnic groups will fight against other different Jewish ethnic groups sometimes, depending on whether you're Ashkenazi or whether you're part of there are darker skinned Jewish ethnic groups, believe it or not. To say that Jewishness is one distinct cultural ethnic thing is not true. That can be proved by DNA. It's absolutely not true. And 2, other people can marry into Jewish families or become Jewish and get Israeli citizenship. It's not an ethnic thing. It's not done by DNA. So Israel is not an ethno-state. Moving away from that, I'm still responding to the original thing you said. I can't even respond. I can't even respond. I can't even respond to the original point.
Let him give him all the time. Go ahead. Take all the time.
Okay. So number 2, there are probably different immigration concerns for the United States versus Israel. That's not very surprising to me. Like, I don't know how many Americans are trying to say that like Iraq should be open to an infinite number of immigrants from Iran and Syria, much the same that I don't know why Americans would say Israel should have the same immigration policy as the United States. That's nonsense to even suggest that. And to try to say, well, Jews in the United States have a different opinion between Jewish borders in Israel and American borders in America is just another way of saying Americans in America think that we should have different immigration policy than Israel should have for Israel, which is obviously true.
No. What you've got here is, again, massive hypocrisy. You have groups in the UK, like the British Board of Deputies, which is the most powerful Jewish group in the UK, and these support the State of Israel and the State of Israel's policy on closed borders and maintaining a Jewish supermajority within Israel, and support the nation-state law that Israel has, which defines Jews as a special group apart from all others that the nation should put first, and at the same time call for open borders for Britain, compassion for refugees to come here. That is hypocrisy. To say that one state and one group of people should be able to maintain its ethnic group, should maintain its borders, to prevent people coming in, should not be multicultural because that puts the Jewish people at risk in Israel. But on the same page, they then state that the indigenous people of Britain should open their borders, let people in, multiculturalism is going to be great for the British people. That's just hypocrisy. That is simple hypocrisy.
So if you're 4 years old and you think every single country should have every single policy be the exact same thing, I can understand why you might think that that's
not what I said. That's not what I said. What I said is a group of people who state that it should be closed borders for Israel and Israel should maintain a Jewish supermajority, who then say that it should be open borders for Britain and the indigenous Britons shouldn't be interested about maintaining.
What does indigenous Britons even mean to you? What does that mean to you when you say that?
Well, it's the English, the Irish, the Scots, and the Welsh, the people who make up.
When you say English, Scott, like, are you what? Like, is a fourth generation immigrant who's very black?
Oh my god!
No, I'm just curious because
we're not going into Sargonisms here. We're not going out.
I'm just curious what an indigenous Briton is to you, or an indigenous Irish person. I'm just curious what that means to you. Thesaurus
or dictionary or definition machine. Ralph, you've made loads of super chats off this. Buy the guy a dictionary or a thesaurus. Get it in the post. You can.
I didn't know I would trigger you so much. I'm
he
sorry.
Can sit there, couldn't he? People can super chat him a word and he can look it up in his dictionary as thesaurus. Oh, I've got a new definition for you.
You got to get me what triggers these guys first, bro. I'm sorry. I didn't know I would set this guy up so much. I'll go back to my game. Go ahead. What's the next question?
And also, you can't make the joke that I made a few minutes earlier. That was my joke. You've got to come up with your own, like, witticism. But I actually was playing again.
No, I just did it. I just took your joke. It's multiculturalism. I'm a melting pot of humor over here. I think I did it better, too. So
I don't think you did.
All right, now I've lost my place here. Okay, Archie says, whites don't want to be a minority. We were never asked. Survey shows that more than 70% of white Brits do not want to be a minority. Living with whites or in China isn't a human right. I don't get that. But then he says, voting laws are highly race-based. Diversity will end democracy and reinforce tribalism. What do you think about that statement at the end? Destiny. That it's a threat to democracy.
What reinforces tribalism?
Yeah, that's what he said. It was a threat to democracy, basically.
What is tribalism?
Diversity.
I mean, I don't think so, but
okay.
I mean, we're learning that in the United States right now. The people on the left kind of just took the Hispanic vote for granted, and the people on the right thought that they would never reach Hispanic voters, and that trend is starting to change scarily fast. And we're starting to see more and more Hispanic people voting for conservatives and supporting conservatives. So the idea that it's a really weird, archaic idea that like certain immigrant groups are always going to support certain parties or whatever, I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that a lot of people can vote in different ways depending on where their political or social interests lie.
All right, now I thought you were done talking there. That's what I started playing.
No, you're good. Don't worry about it.
Let me see if it'll play. Will it play again? Oh, here it goes. There it goes. Okay.
Destiny implied the education teaches slavery in context. He knows that isn't true, and so do his followers. Alternative sources are the only place you can learn about the Arab rule, etc.
What do you say?
Nobody learns about the Arab slave trade. I feel like we learned about the slave trade of the world, but it's been like 20 years since I've been to school learning about this shit, okay? But I feel like I remember learning about all the different countries that did slave trades during, like, obviously we touch on American and European slavery more, but that's because that's what our background is.
All right, now let's try the power chat. I wonder if I'll have to start it myself or
Jesus Christ.
Sorry,
Godzilla 37 sent $3. Destiny talks about how all races are being bred out into a mixed race. Liar. All other races have their own home countries, dipshit. Absolute snake equals Destiny.
What is the home country of an African American descendant of a slave in the United States? That's like the worst example to possibly bring up.
It's not the worst example. What the guy's saying is very simple to understand. He is saying quite clearly that if you go to Africa today, there are a number of nations and states which are there for African people, run by African people, and they are not under threat of being bred out. But what he's equally saying is when you come to Europe, European people are being bred out and are becoming minorities in ancestral land. I don't understand what you didn't understand about that super chat.
There are like 4 or 5 ongoing genocides in Africa today, and you're trying to talk to me about a white genocide, and your go-to examples, well, in Africa, there are lots of black people living happily in their own nations. First of all, I'm pretty sure if you're a white person, you could probably immigrate to a lot of these areas, number one. And now they're intentionally trying to enforce some cultural or some ethnic homogeneity, all right? And then number two, there's still a lot of killing and stuff down there that makes these places not safe for these people either. I don't know. I have no idea what the fuck this point is supposed to establish.
It's gone over his head. It's gone over. Move on, Ralph.
Yeah, I'm actually going to read some of these because it'll take. I'm just going to read through them because it'll take too. I love TTS, but it's going to take too long to let it play.
All night. I mean,
yeah, that's why I'm just going to read through them.
Bit, Ethan, but don't keep me.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I'm going to read through these. Jesse Lee Peterson. I don't know if that's really him. This is Destiny. That's a woman's name. You were raised by your daddy and mama. That makes you half a man and half woman. You are a beta. You're not a real man. Beta. I just have one question for you, Beta. Do you love black people? We know he loves black. We watched that segment. It's just hilarious, by the way. Now let's see. Where am I at? Okay. There's more on this page. We got that one in. God of Conquest 91 says, page 35, paragraph 5.5 of the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Exploitation report on the Rotherham government website says the majority of the perpetrators were from minority ethnic communities described as, quote, Asian males. Godzilla 37 says you can't spell disingenuous piece of shit without Destiny or D-E-N-S-I. Well, you get it, whatever. Then he says, well, I don't know why. Yeah, I was about to say, that doesn't fit. But then he says, please forward this to Destiny. Maybe he can buy some balls and shoulders, he said. But I don't see. There's no link attached, though. So maybe I'm missing something there. But Godzilla 91 says, from the same Home Office report, Destiny keeps citing page 8, paragraph 7, a number of high-profile cases, including the offending in Rotherham, have mainly involved men of Pakistani ethnicity. Then he admonishes you to read more closely, he says.
I did read more closely, but this is what I was attacking Mark over. There were a number of high-profile cases, but that doesn't mean the majority of the cases or the majority of the people that engaged in that type of is like child grooming, rape behavior or whatever. There were some high-profile cases that were of Pakistani people, so people saw those high-profile cases and they extrapolated it to, most of the rapists must have been Pakistani.
Dan Bigfoot says racial mixing plus migration means European population gets mixed and replaced. Only one group believes they are commanded by God to do it. Deuteronomy 25:19, quote, blot out the memory of Amalek. Pepe says, so by Destiny's logic, we could limit USA immigration to Europeans and people married to Europeans, and that wouldn't make it an ethno-state. Destiny just solved it for us, he said.
European isn't an ethnicity, so I don't know. I have no idea what that means.
Homo Trolley says, can Destiny or the good man, Mr. Collett, explain to me why the most melanated part of my white-skinned body is my butthole, as he said. I don't know if they can explain that. I don't think anybody can explain that. Jesus. Destiny says, he says race mixing is rare, he said. And then he mixes. My
understanding is that people are doing more interracial marriages, that number is going up and up and up every generation in the United States. Maybe it's not.
I wonder why. Could it be because there's a concerted effort in the media and advertising agencies and Hollywood to present interracial couples as the most desirable kind of coupling? I mean, you only have to watch British Christmas adverts to see that virtually every family featured is mixed race, yet mixed race families only make up a tiny minority in Britain. And again, this point, which we didn't even get into tonight, does show, again, part of the big picture. It's another part of this big picture. The press, social media, Hollywood, television companies, advertising companies always present a vastly disproportionate number of mixed-race couples. Why do they do that? Why don't they just present what actually exists in Britain? Because they have an agenda, and this agenda is to promote something and to seed the idea that something takes place on a much wider level than it does, to promote it.
Absolutely true. I remember for my first wife, I thought about having kids so much, but every time I would see another commercial with another mixed race family, I was just thinking, God, I wish I could marry a Hispanic lady and have some kids. And I think that's why my first marriage didn't work out, actually, when I think back on it.
Godzilla.
I watched a lot of commercials back then, though. I think I was watching too much TV.
Godzilla 37 says, yeah, because you said it's not just the whites are being bred out. You countered with others are too, the Chinese, etc. So F you again, Destiny. Pesatron says the most passionate Destiny show tonight was when describing culturally homeless and lost U.S. blacks, yet claims to not understand why white people should be upset about increasingly marginalized white culture and history in UK. And then he says anti-white.
I've never said anything about not understanding like why white people might feel shitty in the United States. I think there's a lot of issues with how we address groups of people in the Western world. I think that the constant, I even said earlier, the constant idea that you'd be like, fuck white people, white genocide, Mayo-cide. But if you were to ever say anything like that about like Asian people, black people, Hispanic people, people would jump down your throat. I think that's super ultra cringe. And then I think
so you are agreeing with me then?
I on the most superficial level possible, which I guess is the only level you operate on. Sure, I agree with you, Mark. I think it's really cringe when you have like groups of people that think it's okay to shit on white people and they do so openly, but then every other group is protected.
But I mean, is that really a superficial point?
That's what I've been saying all
night. That's not a superficial point necessarily. I mean, that's kind of a
superficial point because I see where it comes from because I'm more mature than a 4-year-old, but Mark thinks it's an intentional move towards dispossessing white people. I think that it's unfortunately the reaction of way too much corporate influence, way too many people that are caught up in the cancel culture, way too many people that have too much power online on social media, and way too much pressure on advertisers to buckle to the like slightly controversial thing whatever they see to like
hold on, you can say, wait, hold on.
Everything I said earlier on, you've just admitted that what I've said is true. You've just admitted that it is okay absolutely to dunk on whites and to say whatever you want about
I have never said anything different than that ever. I don't like, this is why I said before, I don't think you know who you're talking to, or I don't even know if you know what the conversation is about. Our conversation, even Ralph had to pull you in several times on this. Our conversation has never been, are there like people that act shitty towards whites in the mainstream media more so than other groups? That's obviously true. Nobody would deny that. But your argument is that there's an intentional effect there to breed out the white race led by a group of mysterious men behind the scenes for every single country.
Basically, what you're saying is, more or less, everything I pointed out tonight is right, but you don't think there's intentionality behind it. So everything's just one big coincidence.
It's not a coincidence. Let me catch you up to the last 2 hours of conversation. What I'm saying, my issue with conspiracy theorists, I'm explaining to you. Don't worry. I'll talk slowly, okay? My issue with people that speak sometimes in conspiracy, and I don't mean that in a negative way, I mean when you say there's a giant plan orchestrated, is that you'll take a collection of facts that could have what is otherwise a reasonable explanation and then try to ham-fist this idea of white genocide. So when there are cops covering for other cops, instead of it being dirty cops covering for dirty cops, it becomes white genocide. When there are advertisers that are worried that somebody engaging in hate speech might cause people to do a big boycotting campaign, like what happened in 2017 on YouTube, instead of seeing that as, well, advertisers want to make money, you say white genocide. Or when you see some white people that are like, man, I've had a really good life, I feel bad, a lot of people in the US have really shitty lives, maybe I like hate myself, or maybe there's like slavery fucked everything up and now I feel bad for it. Whereas I see like normal white liberal guilt that's cringe, you see white genocide. Our whole conversation has been about you and me agreeing descriptively on a lot of facts, but you trying to ham-fist a white genocide explanation for everything. So I think there's a plenty good reasonable explanation for why people act the way they do in every other circumstance.
So basically what you're saying is I'm a conspiracy theorist, but people in the chat are calling you a coincidence theorist. So whereas I look at the breadcrumbs and I see where they're heading and I see a pattern in this, you just see things pointing all in the same direction, but then you put your thumbs in your ears and scream coincidence, and that's it. So
one of the best things that humans can do is find patterns where they don't exist. It's one of the biggest things that gave us an advantage in the wilderness, and it's one of the things that fucks us up the most today. If you wander in accidentally to literally any psych course for the first 6 months, you're going to learn about a whole bunch of things that explain your entire worldview. For instance, why you can say with a straight face, I don't agree with the massive report on rape because I saw 4 news stories from Sky News and the Daily Mail for what is actually happening, right? Yeah, I can't engage with that level of thought. There's no back and forth that can happen there.
Okay. Well, I think that last point has been very illuminating and interesting.
I agree. Absolutely.
I'm glad we hit that too. All right, real quick, caller.
Destiny, one last question.
Go ahead.
Is it a coincidence or is it a coincidence?
You know what I actually think it is? I think that it's a conspiracy by white people to destroy every other country. I think that what's happening is I think white people are trying to take all of the smartest and best workers from other countries, and they're importing them to white countries, and then we're going to breed with them to make superhuman white babies. They get all the intelligence of the white people and all the hard work ethic and whatever else we import from the other people, and we're destroying every other country. So I don't think it's actually white genocide. I think every single place where you see white genocide, it's actually white supremacy. You are actually the one advocating for white genocide because you're advocating for white people to remain in closed borders where we can't take on the most powerful and best immigrants from other countries. You want the weakest, whitest NBA team imaginable. And the white supremacist people that you call the white genociders are actually bringing the strongest immigrants ever that we can breed into our own population to make super white people. I think you're actually you're like a psyop. You're the one that's actually encouraging the real white genocide by inbreeding and eliminating the white race. Disgusting, Mark.
No.
Well,
do we want to take callers real quick, or I mean we've hit everything.
I think we've kind of wrapped up.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of I kind of feel the same way.
Closing points. I mean, it's been 2
yeah, that's
hours.
the thing.
I said this was going to be 2 hours.
Well, hey man, it got good.
So you could make more super chats.
No, it was a good conversation. I like to keep it going.
When Ralph's making the coin, he likes to milk it. He'd have this as a 6-hour stream if he could.
Oh boy! Also speaking, I know that Fuentes is wanting to talk to you again, Destiny, about vaccines. I've been hearing some noise about that, so maybe.
Yeah, but I've got like 7 people that want to schedule that debate.
Right.
So
well,
who finally gets it?
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll talk to you about it soon then.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just do closing statements. I'll let Mark start off and let Destiny get the.
Southern Dingo wants to be a caller though, doesn't he? He's just messaging me saying, "Can he be the one caller?" So that's up to you, Ralph.
All right, go ahead, Dingo. Are you there?
Yeah, mate.
Yeah, what's
How
up,
you
man? Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Fucking can Mark hear me, mate?
I can.
Okay, great. Destiny, just wanted to tell you, the only way anybody would say that Destiny won this debate is if they got your 2 names confused, mate. How does it feel? Is this L bigger than the last dildo your wife put in your bum?
That was amazing, my dude.
Answer the fucking question, Destiny.
3 hours to hammer that one out. Yeah. What else did you write up?
Just that. All right, man. Mark wins.
Thank you, Dingo. I appreciate that. All right, now.
One caller.
All right.
So do you want to do closing statements? Who wants to go first? Do you want to go first, Destiny, or do you want me to?
No, I'll let you go first.
I think technically you should go first because I did the opening statement first. But
okay, I'll go first. You want me? I don't have anything written down, so
I don't have anything written down either. I'm not going to write anything down. But I mean, I can go first if you want, but it's up to you.
Oh, you went first for the opening.
Yeah, just go ahead.
So, but basically, my issue when I have conversations related to white genocide is establishing the intentionality part is always something that's done through a ton of inferencing. We can collect a whole bunch of random facts and we can tell literally any story we want about any particular thing. People do this when they make reality TV shows. You can watch really good clips of how you can cut together anything to make something look a certain way. There are plenty of stories that happen in today's world. We're at a planet of, what do we have, 8 billion people now? You can collect any number of stories to tell any overarching narrative that you want. I think that when it comes time to looking at like what society is doing or what direction we're heading, if you want to establish that there's actually a plan to go somewhere, I think it's really important to be able to say, this person wants to do this. You can see that because they're doing this and they've stated this reason for that and people are supporting them for this reason. When your entire system of intentional white genocide relies on every single level of people acting in an unintentional manner, I think that it's far less conspiratorial and way more reasonable to say, actually, you know what? Everybody's probably acting the way they want to because they think they're affecting some other outcome and not actually engaging in a manner of white genocide to eliminate the white race.
Well, I'm going to say pretty much the opposite of this. I'm actually shocked towards the end of this debate to how much Destiny actually agreed with things that I was saying. It's just he believes these things are all happening independently by some, cosmic coincidence. All these anti-white things are all coincidentally happening all over. All of these mixed race couples on the TV, it's just a coincidence. all of these cover-ups of horrific anti-white crimes, it's a coincidence. All of this anti-white hatred being taught in schools, it's all of a coincidence. And we can go on and on because everything's a coincidence. Now, I do believe there is a conspiracy. There doesn't seem to be a debate over whether we are becoming a minority, whether we're being bred out. We are, and I believe that is intentional. I also believe that is a bad thing. One thing we didn't really get into is whether white people becoming a minority would be a bad thing, but the debate has come to a close. I believe it will be, and I just urge everyone tonight, not necessarily from my side of the political spectrum, but from the people watching over on Destiny's YouTube, to just look into some of the things that I said. Have an open mind, look into it, do a bit of your own research, because it is an important topic. And if you take anything away from what Destiny said tonight, I think it was a bit of a slip he made earlier, because I was talking about how terrible rape was, how terrible it was for people to suffer like that these rapes that happen in the UK are absolutely foul. And at one point, he seemed to be snickering, and he said, no, he doesn't think racism is acceptable. He substituted in his mind the word racism for rape or rapist. And I think that tells you a lot about the mind of people like Destiny, that in his mind, there is no greater evil than racism. Racism is even worse than rape. That's what it kind of implied. And I think a lot of people on his side of the political divide believe that. And it is that kind of nonsense that has been seeded into our people that prevents our people from defending themselves, because people are so desperate to avoid being called racist. They're so desperate to avoid being publicly wrecked and being thought of as somebody who advocates for their own race, that they will stand idly by as hundreds of thousands of white girls are raped by grooming gangs. And I think that tells you the core of the problem. White people have been indoctrinated to hate themselves. That is part of a concerted effort that is aimed at our people to reduce our people to a minority. And when we are a minority, things are going to get a lot worse. I urge you to look into the things I've said. I urge you to take on what I've said tonight, at least some of those things, and I hope you've enjoyed the debate. Please follow me on Odysee, at Mark Collett, follow me on Telegram, follow me on Gab, and thank you for being here tonight with us, and thank you to Ethan for hosting it.
Thank you both, gentlemen. Always a pleasure to have both of you here on the show, so thank you so much. Happy New Year to you both. Hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you so much, Destiny. You have a good one too, man.
Have fun, buddy.
All right, now let me switch tabs here. That was a fun one, I have to say. Let me see. Oh, there we go. Oh, now they're going to come out.
God of Conquest.
Okay, hold on. Wait, hold on. I'll play those in a minute. Okay. Yeah, there we go. All right, now let me... There's the shirt on the screen. Very cool. I didn't think that was rude. It wasn't rude. Somebody in chat said rude. I don't think so. That seemed okay. All right, now I thought it was a fun discussion. We got more stuff coming, by the way. Don't leave. Should I turn on the other outlets too? I think maybe. Do we need a song after that? I don't know. Should we? We haven't had a tequila sunrise today. Should we do a song? I kind of want to hear the Tequila Sunrise song, too. Oh, what is this? Damn, Cheez-It snacks. Holy shit. Damn, I got an amazing woman here. Oh, M&M's, too. What the fuck? Successful. Did you see some of the debate?
I saw it all.
Really? Yeah. Even while you're going to the store and stuff?
Yeah.
What a legend. What an absolute legend. Get over here. Sit down. Go ahead.
Hey.
Hi. Oh.
Godzilla 37 sent $3. You can't spell disingenuous piece of shit with IDENSI, and TY will earn for good measure.
Maybe we'll let this play for a sec. Sort of catch up.
Pepe sent $3. So by Destiny's logic, we could limit USA immigration to Europeans and people married to Europeans, and that wouldn't make it an ethno-state? Destiny just solved it for us.
Godzilla 37 sent $3. Please forward this to Destiny so maybe he can buy some balls and shoulders.
Very rude.
John Bolton sent $5. Please, for the love of God, watch Killstream episode from 2 weeks ago with Ralph and Dawson about reparations and the Civil War of the USA. Please watch it and fuck Lincoln. He didn't give two fucks about slavery, lol.
Tonka Saw sent $3. Destiny, you flaming pile of shit. Fight me IRL. Anonymous sent $3. Since China is set to become world economic superpower, do you all think this would change migration destination?
John Bolton sent $3. Ralph, you left us hanging chads here in Discord, mate. We are disenfranchised.
Bryce mix it, Ralph. I'm going to mix it. They didn't even pay the $3 to read that out. That would have been funny if you'd have paid the full $3. I'll read it out anyway, though. This is just going to hang on the screen? That kind of makes it funny, too. Shinshan, go.
Shinshan256B sent $20. Destiny. Buck broken. Dingo comes in with the best lightning round comment. Classic. Homo Trolley has sent $3. Can Destiny or the good man Mr. Collett explain to me why the most melanated part of my white-skinned body is my butthole, where the poo-poo comes out?
Damn Bigfoot sent $3. Racial mixing plus migration means European population gets mixed and replaced. Only one group believes they are commanded by God to do it. Deuteronomy 25:19. Blot out the memory of Amalek.
So what?
Destiny loves BBC sent $3. Destiny, race mixing is literally so rare, you absolute moron. Also, you said Jews aren't hypocritical with their stances on the West and Israel? Check out here's Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, CUC. Unknown Californian sent $3. Destiny is gaslighting himself at this point.
All right, I think we're caught up. Now, what were you saying?
Oh, I was saying some little black kid approached me while I was listening and had my headphones in. And he's like, oh, can you donate to my my college fund or whatever? And I was just like...
Really?
Yeah, I just gave him $5, but...
Wow.
I was like,
He's put that on the sack for sure.
Yeah, could he tell what I was listening to?
My college fund? I'm a sucker for that shit. Usually it has to be a mixtape or something before I'll actually give my name up.
He was selling like dog treats, but they were $10. I didn't have $10.
I don't want to give my dog that shit either.
No, I didn't know where it came from.
My dog's too old. That'd be the fucking shit. Your dog dies like fucking 14 years old from some fucking bogus ass treat you bought at the store.
Bootleg treats.
That's from fucking Wuhan, China. Just like, what the fuck?
Oh my god.
Yeah, see, I gotta get the mixtape. They've seen me live. I still haven't played that mixtape on air.
Adolwolf sent $3. Ralph, if you don't mix those cheese its with those goddamn M&Ms, I'm going to be pissed.
That is.
You are race mix it, Ralph.
Chat's mad at you for giving the $5.
Of course.
Yeah. I'll give money sometimes. They have to look really homeless, though. Or look really hard up. Or have a mixtape.
Destiny's Prolapse sent $3. The white race will secure ourselves and secure a future for white children.
Destiny's Prolapse, I see. But yeah, I thought it was a really good debate. I hope you enjoyed that too.
It was really interesting. Destiny started saying some wild shit at the end, I'm gonna be honest.
Was it getting wild? Did you see the glow in the dark shirt, by the way?
Oh, that's a classic.
That's a classic. You're gonna cook.
A classic.
You know, Alabama's about to play for the national title tonight as well.
What time?
I think 8, right? I don't know. I have to look.
I got stuff to make nachos. I got stuff
is that right? Yeah, 8 p.m. Eastern. Of course, I'm still going to be broadcasting tonight. Should I pull up the schedule? I guess I should do that. All right, let me see here. Schedule for tonight. Let me find look at Ric Flair and Joe Namath at the game in their fur coats. I don't know if you can see that.
Wow. Baller.
Styling and profiling. Okay, so schedule for tonight. At 7 p.m., the Crucible is going to host a debate. I believe. Let's see. Okay, so I think they're coming in. I forgot they told me the debate last week, but Anyway, we'll catch up on that. They got the 7 p.m. slot. Politically Provoked has the 8:30 p.m. slot. I'm coming back at 10, Dingo versus Galaxy Jesus.
Oh, shit.
Then at 11, I'm going to have Adam Green versus The World, just open callers on him. Night Nation versus Zen Shapiro at 12:30 to close it down. And I think Big Papa Fash is moderating that as well, the Crucible. So Andrew Wilson, I think you dropped that branding, so it was a joke anyway, so probably better to drop it. But yeah, that's going to be the overnight. Tomorrow night, Vince Jennings versus Mr. Girl, Styx versus Ramsey Paul, Vito Giswaldi coming on Wednesday night. Then next week, we have, let's see, the Captain Tazaryak versus Andrew Meyer, Adam Green versus Classical Theist, and Dick Masterson versus Amy Teresi.
Look at that fucking lineup, dude.
On prostitution, we're going to have the debate on that. So
I can't wait for that one.
It's going to be pretty interesting. Well, I just want to have you check in. Thank you for the snack and everything.
Absolutely. I'm going to make dinner soon.
All right, steak. What are we doing? Steaks, nachos? What are we doing?
We got asparagus and potatoes.
We can't do steak and nachos. That's too much.
You can't?
Is that too much?
I don't know.
It's game night.
It's game night. What the fuck?
Damn. That's true. All right, I will take callers. All right, thank you, sweetheart. I appreciate it. I love you.
Yeah.
All right, I'll see you soon. All right, John Bolton, what's up, man? Can you hear me?
What's up, man?
I didn't leave you behind. What's up?
I didn't expect you to even drag us in. I forgot I wasn't even on Discord.
I forgot, too. What's up?
Nothing, man. Listening to that debate, man, brain fucks you, man. Fucking hell. I'm not a big fan of that topic particularly much, but I understand where he's coming from, but it just feels like a bit, it's not my kind of thing. But I understand what it means. Like, I understand the aspects of it and all the shit and the crap. Like, I'm against disenfranchising people and not letting people, say what they want and etc. Like, for me, even if someone says we are, I can definitely see where he's coming from when he says people are getting their lives destroyed. I live in Europe, I live in Sweden, etc. And it's this thing that everyone knows is super taboo to talk about. Everyone in Europe knows this, and they know, if you go against the status quo, you'll get fucked. They'll shit wreck you. That's why all of these fucking groups like ADL and SPLC and all this crap are enmeshed within the governments and stuff. That's why, you don't need that many examples. I mean, it's not that hard to understand. Just look at Jeremy Corbyn, for example, in the UK. I mean, it's super straightforward, example. He got wrecked. His entire career, thrown into the dumpster because of his, solidarity with Palestinians or whatever. When he got stampled as anti-Semite, blah blah blah. The usual crap you get thrown at from the ADL and stuff, and it destroys your career. That just shows you that the power that these groups wield, and these groups are not some fucking grassroots organizations within the countries. They are, all of them are working for the interest of a government, a foreign government. And that should, highlight it. If you had a bell right now, you could just ding, 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 ding. All the bell signs will go off. It's straightforward. It's not even, a debate talking about it. It's something that is just, blatantly right in front of you. And I can't understand for the life of me, how Destiny can be to just brush it all off. But at the same time, you have to understand also from his perspective, maybe, if a guy that, doesn't give a crap, maybe not doesn't give a crap, but, he doesn't understand. He hasn't put that much time and effort, looking into these things and stuff like that, maybe, he doesn't live, or he does his social circles, he hasn't witnessed, people, getting hammered or getting their life destroyed or whatever. But it's, I mean, it's hard, I don't know But it's just weird to me, you know. It doesn't take that much effort to, you know, see all this shit, you know. But it's like this thing, you know, with everything becomes politicized, you know. You don't have to take that much into it, you know. Government is shit. Like in the end, like it doesn't matter if you're on the right or the left or etc. Like you're all gonna get fucked in the end by the government, because the status quo is. I mean, they don't give a rat's ass if you kill each other. You're just helping them out in the long run, because they don't give a rat's ass about you, because you're just doing it for the interest of the government. The government will fuck you over no matter what. All of you are gonna pay taxes like the good slaves you are in the end. You know, that's what you all have in common. You're gonna go. You will all die in the end. I mean.
Well, that too. Well, fuck. Now you got really dark there. Hold on. Now, wait. Wait a minute. I mean, you got too dark. I was on board until that last part, but I'm just fucking with you. Thank you, man. I appreciate you calling in, and I just want to say thanks for the support. Happy New Year. I'm going to run through the rest of these callers.
Likewise, mate.
And try to schedule the rest of the show.
Fuck Israel with cactus. Yes,
thank you, sir. Appreciate you, man.
Take care, guys. Happy New Year, everyone.
All right. Thank you. You too. All right. Let's go. BC Covington, go.
Cactus Pit.
Uh-oh, that sounds like me getting played back.
Yo. Sorry, Ralph. Can you hear me?
Yep. What's up, man?
Yo, great debate, obviously. Mark really kicked Destiny's ass. Jesus Christ. What did you think as you were moderating? Were you like, this is at all even? Or were you like the whole time?
I don't weigh in on stuff like that. I don't.
No, but in your own head, I mean, obviously not as like at the time, but in your head, were you like, this is an ass kicking? Or was there any point where you were like, well, Destiny has a point here?
No, I don't make comments like that about the debates. I can't. I moderated the debates.
Oh, you're an actor? Oh, all right.
No, I'm not an actor. I'm a moderator. I don't comment on it's like a referee saying who he thought was winning the game or something during the middle of the fucking game.
No, but I mean after. I didn't say after.
I thought you said I'm not an actor. Oh, okay, sorry.
No.
So I was say no, I'm not acting. I mean, I just don't. I just don't do that because if I was a participant in a debate and I heard the moderator later on telling me what he thought somebody should have done or should have said or what he thought agreed with or not, I try not to do that. There might be here and there maybe, but very rare. It would be very rare that I would do something like that. A couple of people I got in fights with after that, I was like, yeah, you got stomped. That's my real opinion.
Oh yeah, I think I've seen a few of those.
But in general, I don't do that. I try to keep my powder dry in that manner.
Yeah, like Destiny said like a few things that were just straight wrong too. Like he said like everyone is getting genocided when he was forced to admit that whites are getting genocided. Africa has been the fastest growing continent since the 60s. It's only grown. And it's the only continent that is consistently growing. And like so the population thing, it's like in the future, like almost half of the world will be African. That's completely subsidized by Western nations, food, technology, and everything. So that's us subsidizing their growth. So his contention that like, oh, well, everyone's going down. That's not true. It's selective. It's we're going down, they're going up. Asia's going down based on their own. They're doing it to themselves because they grew so fast that they actually needed a controlled decline. That's very different than what's happening in Europe, America, and Africa. Like Africa is growing every decade and will for the next century. So like, I don't know. I was going to call in and bring that up with him. Oh, and also the whole Israel as a Jewish nation state thing. I mean, it's literally defined as ethnic and religious in the law. So Mark probably maybe could have hampered it on that a bit more, but Destiny's saying it's not ethnic. I mean, or it's not religious. You can be Jewish and atheist and go to Israel. That means if it's not religious, it's ethnic, right? If you're an atheist, but you have the Jewish ethnicity, then you can go to Israel.
All right.
So that disproves it right there. But yeah, anyway.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you calling in. Thank you for the support.
Yeah.
Happy New Year.
Good day.
All right. Let's see here. White Wolf, go. That was you talking about getting Blair. Was that you talking about getting Blair Cottrell on the show?
Yeah, I was about to say that.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that. Just message me again, man. I'm not dodging it. I just had a lot of stuff going on. I was putting on all these debates and stuff too, and I just don't want to do something and do it half-assed. That's the only thing. But yeah, I'll have him on the show.
He's keen, man. He's waiting.
Okay, bet. Oh, okay. You've already talked to him about it then. Okay, you know what? push me another message so it goes up to the top of my box, and I'll send him an email after the show tonight. I won't be off the air until like 2 a.m. probably. I mean, people are going to come in and do their own stuff too, by the way. We're about to have another program come on. But I'll still be here overseeing stuff and all that, so I probably won't just go away. But after the shows tonight, I'll send him an email. It's an email, right?
Yeah. I've been talking to him on Telegram.
Okay, so. Telegram's fine too. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. And I'm hopeful I'm about to have a John Fashcroft versus Stardust debate set up on abortion tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. Eastern before the Mr. Girl debate for day 2 of the festival. I'm trying to get another one in. Now, this one is a little shoehorned, but I still think it might be good. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Blair I don't think Blair would ever debate anyone. He's not that type of guy. So I was just kind of waiting for you to get past this period before asking again.
Yeah, I got you.
But yeah, I'm just a bit disappointed, Ralph. You should have gone with the Ford Raptor X. You know, that's a good car.
Well, that could be. By the way, I'll unmute this just to say I'll take you guys off the screen while you get set up. Then I'll talk to you on Twitter and we'll get it fixed up here. We have Andrew Wilson here. Okay, I'll take that off the screen. How the fuck did I do that? Where'd that go? Oh, there it goes. All right. Go ahead. Finish your call. Sorry, I'm doing 15 different things at once.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's pretty much it. You answered my call for me, so that's all I was going to say, really.
Okay, good. I'm glad you reminded me. Thank you, man.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Oh, you too. Elja, whatever. Elg, go ahead.
Sorry, I had my audio. Did you do your push-ups today? Oh, the listeners out there, did you do your push-ups today?
I did not. I should have. I need to go walk a couple blocks after all this good cooking from Pantsu.